This is our Tuesday, March 12th, regular BOCC work session. And on our agenda now is an update from the Pitkin County Library, and our librarian, Kathy Chandler, is here.
Hi. Thank you, George. I don't have a real firm structure for this presentation in mind, so I'm willing to go with the flow. If you folks have particular questions that you'd like me to do my best to address. The reason that I'm here today is because the city has been working on their landscape design for Galena Plaza, and so they have asked the library to respond to their different iterations as they go through that process. And because of that, I have been going to several city council meetings, and I wanted to make sure that you folks knew what was going on over at City Council, what's been going on with the library board, and Rob Ittner had asked at some point to kind of have a talk about how the library was doing following the election, where we were, and this is sort of one of those herding chickens sort of a thing, where we're kind of being pulled in different directions, and it's not a real orderly fashion of moving through our new thought process, because there have been several times when the library board has had time scheduled to go through staff comments that we've had asked everybody to put down their ideas following the election, in November and December, and instead of actually going through those ideas yet, we've been spending quite a bit of time looking at the landscape options for Galena Plaza. So I come to you the day before. Tomorrow we're supposed to, again, try to get on the library board going through these staff comments. And one thing that I'm going to propose to the library board tomorrow is that we actually close the library down one day this spring, when town's sort of dead, to just spend a day with all of the staff together in one room reviewing all of the various ideas that have come out since the election. And so I'll just tell you about the library board's requests for the design of the Galena Plaza. They have asked for the design team to keep the library's easement in mind and not put any built structures there, like planter boxes or bleachers or things that would have to be torn out when the library is able to take advantage of its easement. And the city staff has been really responsive in trying to reply to the concerns from the library board. And we've asked, for the sidewalk to be configured as it would come into the new entrance that stepped out 44 feet from the present entrance. And so they're trying to make that all happen for us so that when the library is able to expand, there isn't a big change to the way that the plaza has been redesigned. So that's one thing that's underway. Another thing that the library board has been looking at is just the process of the election, the things that we heard from the voters, and we're kind of trying to go through those, and we've identified probably 10 to 13 different reasons that people had to vote no on that question to increase taxes, and are then now trying to break those down and decide how we can respect the opinion of the voters and yet still try to fulfill the needs of the library community. Because we lost the election, but the needs for the library didn't go away. We're still trying to get a meeting room that people can get in and out outside of library hours to use, and a more secure children's room, trying to get small group study rooms, and a concept called content creation laboratories, which newer libraries have, where you have software and hardware in place for people to come in and create content, and also quiet rooms where people can go to Skype. It's just the way that libraries are being used across the country is evolving, and we're trying to see how much of that can we make happen within our current footprint without doing a major change to the building. And several of the things we knew from having gone through these studies just were not going to work. The way that our building is configured with the open ceiling on the main floor, that precludes relocating things like meeting rooms and children's libraries to the main floor. So I don't know, I feel like I'm babbling. Do people have specific questions, or do you want to?
Let me just start, Kathy.
Yeah.
One of my main concerns is that we all acknowledge, we meaning the public and the city of Aspen, that the library by right has a 44-foot easement. And the whole, part of that whole discussion during the election was whether to utilize that 44-foot easement for structural supports or to go out to 60 feet, which made more sense for structural supports as it ties into the parking garage. And so as the city is looking at repairing their parking garage roof, I just want them to, again, or you and the board, to reiterate, we can go down at some point. I don't know if the board's had this discussion. If and when the city does do a repair, would that be the time that the library would at least put in the structural supports and take advantage of the roof being off? And if so, the differences in terms of the impacts to the parking garage, whether you use your 44-foot easement or whether you go out to the 60-foot, because that was really an important part of the whole reason of going out, and that's where the design became, I think, a community issue. But I just want to make it clear, as the city looks at engineering, that they really understand the impacts at some point, whether the library uses a 44-foot easement or goes out to 60, and then if and when the library board decides to put in enough structural supports, if it's going to be at the same time, which may make more sense than doing it years later. If that makes sense.
Yes, and I just came from a meeting with Jack Wheeler and Jody Smith and Scott Miller and John Latch from the city, where we were talking about that very thing. And I believe that the library board's position is almost finalized, that they would like to get that structural support in at the same time that the roof is being repaired. And what we have, though, is an easement to go out for 44 feet. And what we understand from having worked with the city is that it probably would be easier on the parking garage were we to go and hit that 60-foot wall with this under the turf structural support. That's not to say that the library building would go out to 60 feet. It would stop at the 44-foot easement. And that is something that is still being worked on with the city. Did you have something to
If
add?
you don't mind, George, I think the 44-foot easement is what we know we have, and so we've put notice to the city that it would make sense to do whatever structural work would need to be done to support a structure that would accommodate the needs that were identified during the needs study that we did. Not necessarily the architectural design that we did before, but certainly the interior needs that we identified when we went through our planning process. If the city determines that it's to the benefit of their project and their structure that those supports go at 60 foot versus what we've already have negotiated, I think we would be open, we'd certainly be open to that discussion coming back from the city if they make that determination. But we haven't taken the position of having that discussion about what we think is best for the parking garage versus we know we've negotiated this at 44 feet in the past. We know that we've identified these certain types of structure needs that we think will need to be accommodated, if not now, at some point in the future. And so it makes sense to drop those. And then if the city feels that it'd be better to look at a different structural element, we'd be open to them coming back to us with a proposal.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Michael?
Clarification, this, the 44-foot easement is from the surface up, or is it below grade also?
It's, our assumption is that it's below grade also because we need to be able to put supports in to hold up a library structure. Because of the nature of a library, you have to have a certain amount of live weight load. And so that is our assumption from having spoken with the county attorney is that, yes, in order to take advantage of your 44-foot easement, you need to be able to put structural support in down below.
Yes, I understand that. But my question was, can you occupy, subgrade that 44-foot easement?
You mean, can we take over those parking spaces and go all the way down with the
Well, is
library?
that yours or is it the city's?
I assume that,
I think the easement anticipated construction on top of so, in terms of square footage that could be used by the library, it would be constructed on top of the parking garage, but that there would be accommodation for subgrade supports necessary to do that. But not that we could put stacks like
So
library
there's no
books.
occupancy below grade.
Not that we
Can we clarify that?
could, yeah.
I mean, we're at a point where we need to know, it seems to me, whether or not we can occupy, whether our easement is subgrade or not.
Rob?
And there are a couple of things that kind of rotate around that same question, and it really relates to communicating with the city what type of structural plan they'd be amenable to as they move forward. Because another talk was to take up the same square footage, but to go out to 60 feet and have it, not take up the full length of the library building. That was one of the discussions that we had at one point. A different size rectangle. Go out 60 feet, but have it be a shorter the other way or the same square footage. Change the easement to some extent. The other conversation was to span to the 60-foot with some sort of structural support that could, the design for the library as it was proposed before the election was to have a canopy that went to the 60-foot, although the building structure only went to the 44-foot, and that it was supported from that trellis above, hence not the need for the pillars that go all the way down through the parking spaces, or a structural support that goes at floor level to the 60-foot that doesn't need the pillars at the 40-foot point, i.e. not taking up the parking spaces below, and that could have a structure built just at the 40-foot span. And those are the questions that the city really has to answer for us, I think, more than we have to answer.
I think I would take maybe a slightly different position, which is, if the city were to come back and say that going out to this 60-foot is better structurally for the parking garage, and they'd like to explore options with us, and all those could be on the table. I think we'd be open to those discussions. What I don't think is true of our easement is that the city can dictate what gets built within our 44-foot easement, that they get to tell us what kind of structure or what have you can be built there.
Yeah, I wasn't
And so,
suggesting that
okay,
they do.
okay. But I think, again, what we know is we've got that 44 feet, and so if the city were to make a suggestion that might be better for their project to come and ask us to go to the 60-foot, I think all those kinds of options that you've laid out, Rob, could be part of that discussion.
I guess the first discussion is that we don't have the capability to build to 44 foot without some sort of additional easement from the city, because there's no way to structure it. There's
You can put structures in.
So that was Michael's question. I
Well,
heard the
no,
answer
no, it
was,
wasn't.
I don't know.
It wasn't.
No, I think it's
Clearly,
different.
clearly
We
we
have
have, it's a question of support. It's you either put a support wall at 40 feet, or you put a support, you use the existing wall that's at 60 feet, and you still only have a 44-foot easement, but the span allows you to not interfere with the parking spaces that are adjacent to the library. So if we put in a wall structure or a post structure at 44 feet, essentially that part of the parking garage will be unusable to a large degree as parking spaces.
And we have the right to do that without further easement, to take up parking spaces subgrade. So we have the subgrade rights. That was the question that I believe was asked.
Well, we have the subgrade rights to put down a wall. Whether or not we have the subgrade rights to occupy the space that's
different.
behind that wall towards the library,
Oh,
I
I
don't know.
see what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's a different question, yeah.
Rachel, and then Steve?
Yeah, and I know we're all just throwing different terms around. I had always thought of them more as pillars that would go down as opposed to a wall going down. But I really think it'd be helpful at the next level of the city discussion to have some sort of visual, looking down on the top of the plaza, to be able to dot off, here's the 44-foot, here is the 60-foot, which will make it easier and potentially less expensive to create the support structures. These are the two options. And, this has nothing to do with what eventually goes on the surface, but we should try to define it for them to say, these are the two options that preserve our use of our easement in the future. Which would you like to proceed with? And I don't know at what level they've begun to cost any of those options out, but, we need to simplify the conversation for all of us by having that. And I'm sure you've looked at that with the city's designs, but the designs I've seen at least are more about where the planters will go and the seating will go, and less, and this should just be pure and simple about the easement. So, it sounds like, it's not that the 44-foot is a no-build zone, but that it really needs to be, it needs to be defined as to what we see as the potential on the surface within that 44 feet. We're not exerting any rights to anything further than that. But I think that is just, we need to make our options very clear and visual, so that when it's selected, whoever makes that final selection, we're all agreeing to the same page and not different terminology and verbal narrative that could be interpreted differently.
And the city staff on all of their new drawings do have the library easement drawn out.
Okay.
They don't have that underground wall specified. But if I could come back, Rob, to the different options that you had laid out, indeed, those were things that were looked at by the library with the city as we went through this process. And I believe that the library would no longer be interested in trying to explore any kind of possibility of building outside, taking the building out to a 60-foot line at some place and then dropping back to 44 foot in other places. And I do think in the election, one of the main things that that some, people were choosing to vote against had to do with that 16-foot canopy. And I think some people believed it was a 60-foot canopy, not just the size of a parking space, but that's kind of water under the bridge now. So I don't think those are on the table with us anymore. It would strictly be trying to decide which of these options to explore and price out with engineers, either the 44-foot pillars or if they prefer hitting that 60-foot wall.
And that would be hitting the 60-foot wall with a span that goes across, and you only
Underground.
build at the 44 spot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which would avoid the pillars and the taking up of the parking spaces below or any
Okay.
subgrade structural thing.
Steve?
I think the city really needs to, looking at the Galena Plaza, they should be looking more at what's going on in the parking garage right now than what's going on up above. I'd really like to know how many parking places are being eliminated or are being saved by doing the 60-foot span with big I-beams. Those could be such expensive parking spaces they're saving because of the cost of the extra structure of the I-beams. The cheaper thing, the cheaper way for the city to go might be to have the big pillars at the 44-foot level, eliminate some parking spaces in the parking garage at that point, and add parking places somewhere else, either make the parking garage go up one more level or put parking spaces somewhere outside the parking garage would be a cheaper alternative. The cheapest thing for the library to do would be to have the pillars at the 44-foot level.
Well, I think what, the library board's concern is to make sure that we don't spend money studying something that's absolutely off the table. So we're working with the city staff, who will turn around and work with other folks at the city to see what level of commitment we can get for our various options before we start paying for more engineering work.
And the approach we've been taking is we can clearly identify our interest in providing future library facilities and what we're dealing with there. And so we can bring that to the table. And we're depending on the city, I think, Steve, to answer like the questions that you've been asking so that they can bring their interest in managing the parking structure and what challenges they may have to the table. Because we're not experts in that part of the business, and to find, what is the, kind of solutions that are going to best meet those interests. And so we've kind of communicated then our interest is we know we have a 44-foot. We know that we're going to have some space that will likely get developed at some point in the future. And right now our option is to drop those supports at 44 feet. If that doesn't meet with the interest of the parking garage, then we're relying on the city to come back and have that discussion with us.
Then the other point that you brought up earlier was working with the city in terms of the design of the plaza. You're concerned about putting in some landscaping that at some point may have to be removed within that 44-foot annex. And I guess my question is, have you suggested that if the city wants to do some sort of landscaping or bleachers in the interim, that they may be able to do that, but at such a time that the library does decide to move ahead with expansion, then the city would have to remove those at the city's own cost?
We haven't suggested that to them, but they have actually been very responsive to the library board's concerns, and at this point in time, they aren't looking at putting any of that sort of structure in the easement, so we're really grateful to them for that. We're hoping that they will look at the roof of the parking garage and design it really as though that library expansion has been put in place so that it looks like a hole when that building goes up and not just like somebody lopped off part of their park. And they've been, as I said, really responsive to that concern, and I think that they've arrived at some plans that address those concerns.
Okay, Rachel, and then Steve.
It was just a newspaper comment I had read a while ago from John Latch, and maybe you can address it, but he was saying at this time that he was concerned about how much weight at all to put on the parking garage plaza as they went to rebuild it, and whether or not there could be really big bleachers or big trees or big landscaping in the future, that they should perhaps be more cautious about the weight bearing on that. Have there been any follow-up conversations about that, or how much are they really planning to put up there, or to make it structurally sound for that type of weight?
Well, they've got several different options that they're going to take back to City Council on next week, and so I think it's lighter bleachers that they're proposing. In some cases, they're talking about just really almost having just a blank slate and worrying about redesigning it later. So they've got from one end of the spectrum to the other, but I don't think that probably the type of bleacher configuration they have right now with those trees is in their consideration.
Steve?
Before the election, you had a really beautiful plan for the interface between the library and the plaza to like integrate the two together and integrate the performing arts space.
Yeah.
And if the city could still keep that kind of incorporation between the library and the plaza in mind when they're designing the plaza, and it might look a little funny without the library actually projecting another 44 feet, but that would be a good goal to try to achieve.
Well, and I think that probably is outside our purview at this point in time. But, yeah, I think it would have been neat, but it's not going to happen now.
But still, using that part of the plaza as like an extension, an outdoor extension
Outdoor
of the
reading
library.
area and things.
Yeah.
I think all of those things are possible, but just on a very, scaled back design because a lot of that had come about from our trying to respond to the Civic Area Master Plan, which had stated that when the library took advantage of its easement, it should do its best to enliven the use of the plaza. And so the architects had come up with that support option, where it's kind of killing two birds with one stone, but just didn't work. So I think, what the library board is really looking at is, in terms of the library, also seeing what we might be able to do the addition in a very scaled back way. Some of the voters, said, well, use your own money. And, some people said, oh, well, that money, we have that reserve fund that we've had for 16 years. And, Rob had asked us not to use one of those analogies where you say, oh, well, this is only, so many cups of coffee. And we never said that for the election. But I did notice that finally somebody in their letter to the editor accused us of having that money burning a hole in our pocket that we've had for 16 years. But anyway, at some point, I think that it's responsible stewardship to look at the fact that that money is not being used for the betterment of the library, for the enjoyment of the community. And so we're going to be looking at the possibilities of a very scaled back plan to see whether or not we can make something happen that we would be able to have the meeting room for use outside the library hours, a great children's library, but we will not be able to afford to have an interconnection between those new areas with the library as it currently exists. And a lot of that has to do with the elevation. When the parking garage was built, they hit that underground stream and the parking garage started to rise, so it basically turned our whole east portion of the main floor into a basement level. We just have these small high windows, and so our architects were trying to address that and bring light into the whole building, and that too is off the table. But if we don't try to make everything accessible with changing the mezzanine and everything, there might be a way to realize some of the needs of the library and do it within the money that we actually have on hand. So that's something that the library and the commissioners would need to look at, because we don't want to be disrespectful to the vote. And yet, we're trying to kind of get a feel to how many people voted no simply on the basis of money or on the basis of that proposed design, neither of which need to be considered if you don't ask for money and if you don't do that particular design. So that's sort of where we are, and appreciate your guidance and input. And
Any other questions? Michael?
Well, Kathy sort of said it, but my feeling is about the library is that the analysis of the vote need not go any farther than we don't want you to spend any money raised from a levy. But the vote wasn't about the money that you have now. And so I think it's only responsible for the board and for this board to see how best to use your monies that you have now. And that's your decision and shouldn't be based on a second-guess analysis of what the vote meant. For me, what the vote meant was you're not getting an additional $5 million, period.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing back from you after your retreat and as this moves forward. One quick comment, I see you've got a board member here. Do you just want to identify yourself?
Yeah, John Wilkinson, I'm a trustee on the board. Just a couple of things I wanted to add to Kathy's discussion. You know, the need didn't go away. She said that, and I believe the community knows that. We just want to make sure what we're doing going forward, we don't waste taxpayer dollars, and that was one of the ideas. The whole redesign of the parking garage, that we work in coordination with them. I think it's really important that we come to resolution on pillars out to 60 or 44 feet. The suggestion was made that we don't build a building strong enough or heavy enough that we need the supports. Well, it doesn't make sense because we're a library. We have to design it to withhold, what is it, Kathy, 250?
150.
150 pounds per square foot, which a regular building is.
Around, well, like an office building's around 45 to 50, I believe, right, Jack?
Yeah, so we really, in the library's interest, have to anticipate a 250 pound per square foot building. And that's what necessitates the beams, whether at 44 or 60. I prefer the 60 solution myself. I mean, that would be the cleanest. I like your suggestions on incorporating what we talked about, having an outdoor reading area. That's part of our discussion with the city until we get a structure built. Someday there will be a building there. I mean, we don't know when, you know, looking in the ball, we have no idea at this time, but we're planning on it. We've met with Tom Oken, and we're redesigning our investment strategy to anticipate a building at a certain point, but we don't know when that's going to be. It'll definitely be scaled back, but we still have to meet the needs of the Pickens County Library community.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll conclude this morning's session, Grassroots. We're going to take a break for lunch, and we'll be back here at 1 o'clock.
Lunch?
I forgot to bring our lunch.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next on our agenda is the 2013 USA Pro Challenge. It's an update on the public process and the future review of the permit. And Michael Kramer is here with Nancy Leslie. And I see we have a room full of people. This is a working session, so we won't have public comments, but I know we've invited certain people here as resources for the board to be able to ask questions and clarify anything. So that will be the point of discussion with the public, but we won't be taking any general public comment. So with that, Michael?
Okay, thank you. Mike Kramer with Pickens County ComDev planning staff. And we are here to update the board on the public process of the applicants, the city and Medalist Sports, for the 2013 Pro Cycling Challenge. I should say USA Pro Challenge, that's what it's called. And if you remember, in January, actually January 22nd, we talked to the board in a work session about the future submittal of a permit. And this permit is in the form of a major special event permit that is going to be forthcoming. And the idea behind the work session that we all had in January was that we outlined to the board a public outreach plan that the applicant, the city, undertook to garner input from the public about a variety of routes that could potentially occur for the USA Pro Challenge. And I'll say up front that staff attached 2 routes to the city memo And there's actually a total of 7. So there's actually 5 more maps that could have been included, and it got lost somewhere in translation. But we've got Nancy here to explain the additional maps and routes and what the city looked at for possible options for the race. But basically, on August 19th, they are proposing to have a circuit race. And that circuit race would encompass a variety of county roads, namely Owl Creek Road, Brush Creek Road, Lower River Road, McLean Flats, Smith Hill Way, and then our State Highway 82, and some different variations in how that goes, and we'll let Nancy explain that. And the idea behind the January work session was that we updated the board on a 3-phase approach. The first phase was to do this, to see if the board was amenable to doing a public outreach plan by the applicant. They did that. They actually hired Tom Newland to do that, and he's going to talk to the board about the input they received from the caucuses and the neighborhoods and various other entities. At today's work session, they're going to provide that information, and it'd be great then if the board provides comments and suggestions for the future special event permit that will be submitted. And with that direction, the city will submit the permit, and then we, ComDev staff, will convene the special events committee to review the permit under that application process. So with that said, there really is no board recommendation since we're at a work session, but with the BOC's comments and suggestions, we'll review the special event permit when they submit it after this meeting then.
Okay. Questions for Michael?
There's 7 routes, Michael, but you only include 2?
Yeah.
How come?
Well, I think it got lost in an email, actually. There was only 2, I only saw 2 routes in an email that Nancy sent, and there's actually 7, and somewhere it just got lost. But we can have her explain all the route options. Yeah.
Okay, so are we going to talk about the public process first before we talk about the routes, or which comes first?
Is it okay?
It's okay.
Okay. If it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about maybe a little bit about the public process and then talk about the routes and the impacts. Is that okay? So
That'd be great.
thank you for your time. And I wanted to also point out that I did bring some people who can speak very technically to you, I think, about some very specific answers to your questions that you had. We did, we heard you in January that this is a big deal, and so for the last 6 weeks we have gone out and hopefully we're able to answer all your questions and provide a measure of comfort to you that that we are working towards a day that runs as smoothly as all of us want it to. This is this event is something that, and Tom Newland will go into it a little bit further, but this is something that we have heard from the community. We took the 7 routes and we kind of overlaid all of them. And what we did is we went out into the community onto each of those potentially affected areas and had conversations with them. Tom, again, will outline those conversations, but really with broad-based discussions, since we don't have a route. We had some great feedback from the community that, the community is really excited about this event and they like the event, and it's a great way that they can really support what they do in their everyday lives, the biking, the outdoors, and just showcase, to the world what they do on a normal basis. But what I wanted to do before we got into all that is really point out to you who here in the audience is from a technical aspect. So the guys from Medalist, do you want to raise your hands? And so they'll be speaking to you really kind of about the routes and the impacts. Joe, you guys know without an introduction. Gabe is here from ADH. Thanks. Gabe, was that a hand?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian's here from the airport. Captain Duran is here from Colorado State Patrol. Tom Newland is here. And Lynn Rumbaugh's here from RAFTA. All right. So Tom, would you like to hear about the outreach, kind of the findings? I think what you have in your packet is a pretty extensive list of who we went to, and again, a meeting agenda.
Lynn is not from RAFTA, is she?
Lynn is representing RAFTA. Lynn works closely with RAFTA.
But
and
she's
so-
representing the city of Aston, isn't she? She's not employed
Lynn,
by
do you
RAFTA.
want to clarify?
I work with the city of Austin.
Yeah.
We have a meeting with them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, so I could just, thank you, commissioners. Yeah, so, okay, I'll take the seat then. Thanks. So Nancy and Sandy and I met with representatives from over 25 various homeowners associations, metro districts, caucuses, and affected county departments over the last 6 weeks. Our agenda was pretty simple. It's shown in the packet, but basically we gave everybody a background of the race. We talked about the possible routes in a broad sense, and like Nancy was saying, we basically said, you know, we'd like your comments as if the route was coming by your place. So that, you know, we haven't picked one yet, but that's what we'd like to get from you. We discussed the travel management scenarios during the race and also the approval processes. And then we asked the participants if they had any concerns or issues that might impact their neighborhood based on the information we gave them. And there was a good question and answer back and forth with this, trying to get as much of the specifics of the race across to them so they knew what was going on. And like Nancy said, we got a lot of great comments from almost everybody we talked to. In fact, everybody we talked to came up with a good idea or two that we could utilize. Mainly, there was a couple of, I call them worst-case scenarios that a number of the groups mentioned, and they kind of went like this. Will emergency services be able to respond to an emergency at my house or a house along the route? How would that work? And also, they mentioned a worst-case scenario of a visitor landing at the airport right in the middle of the race, had no idea it's going on and wants to get to their house. How can they do that? So those were kind of the biggest fears that we heard. As far as other issues, one that came up a lot was spectator parking, particularly with respect to the subdivision roads. People were concerned that, hey, people are going to come out and park on my road, and my road's going to get all congested with parked cars while people watch the race. How can we curtail that or not let that happen? Another one, let's see here, was that they were concerned with viewing areas and that they should be kind of designated if we could do that and try to discourage viewing from the county roads and really kind of bring people into designated areas to view the race. That way there would be less chance for trespassing and that sort of thing. That was the concern. Another concern raised, particularly by the homeowners associations, were the service and construction workers, and it could be problematic for them if they were trying to reach houses up in our subdivision during the race. They didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, they can't make it, have to reschedule. So that was another one that was mentioned. Another one that was mentioned was to try to promote the bike trails as much as possible for viewing of the race. You know, get on your bikes, go out on Owl Creek Trail or the Rio Grande Trail and view in that way, and that would help reduce traffic, and also people felt that was the best way to view the race. They also said we need to get the word out early and often to our homeowners associations. They suggested a brief summary sheet that we could send out by email right away, but they also asked us to come back and talk to them directly during their homeowners meetings. And in fact, I think we've got one with Starwood pretty soon coming up here. Also, they came up with some good ideas about trying to get the word out. One guy suggested posters at the bottom of the subdivision roads that you could post a couple of weeks before the event to make sure everybody knew that it was going on when they drove by. And they also talked about possibly posters or maybe even better informational booths at various venues like the Snowmass-free concerts or the downtown market, where you could have a good presence and be able to answer questions and get the word out that way. So a lot of good input with that respect. See, I've got one more here. Oh, no, I don't. Actually, for a summary then, overall, we didn't really hear any negative things. We heard some good positive things and some, valid concerns about the overall operation of this 3 to 4 hour event. Most people understood that it was the impacts would be temporary in nature, and that we could mitigate it through some aggressive information management as time goes on. Basically between now and August, get the word out as much as possible. Work with the homeowners associations and the caucuses to make sure we try to reach out to everybody as much as possible. So that was kind of a summary that I put together of the basic meetings that we did, and the more details and comments you see in your memo.
Questions for Tom? Rob?
I want to first have it be the first words out of my mouth, and hopefully the last words out of my mouth too, that I think this bike race is a tremendous benefit to our community. I think sometimes the press and the stuff that gets out there about us again and again critiquing this proposal is a bad thing. That's what we do. We're here to protect the public interest. It does not mean that we don't think, or I'll speak for myself, that I don't think that this bike race is a tremendous benefit for our community. So with that being my first words, I'll probably also make them my last words as well. Tom, in the packet and in this information, there's a lot of information about concerns, but there's really no information about how they're being addressed. And I'll just go through the ones that I think were key points that you just pointed out, which is emergency response. And I know the last year's packet, the race will be called to a halt if there's an emergency need. I mean, we were told that our sheriff has the ability to stop the race. Parking issues, I mean, that's a big one. I mean, Brush Creek Road, we've seen it on Independence Pass with parking problems, but it doesn't really address in the packet, so I'd like that addressed. Viewing areas, it's hard with these bike races to have designated viewing areas specifically on these public roads, but I think that relates to the parking. This was a new one that I read in the packet last night, and you mentioned it again. I wrote it down as kind of a key point. Service and construction. I mean, that's a huge cost to a homeowner who's doing a remodel. All of a sudden, they didn't plan for some reason, and they got 30 workers going to their house that are going to have to be paid for not working that day. Or at least that's what the contractor is probably going to ask for. And it's just a concern. Again, I think the bike race is a fabulous thing for our community. I'm going to say that again and again. These are concerns, and that's our job sitting at this table. And then the outreach, which I think we get better at every year. But I think we really need to focus some time on not just what was responded, but how we're going to respond to what these communities said.
Right, and we looked at these, at least I did, as kind of scoping sessions, if you will, where we went out and tried to get the neighbors' first responses as to what their concerns were. We definitely tried to answer them as much as we could, and I'll let Nancy try to go through those 4 issues that you brought up, Rob, because we do have answers and solutions for those. I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted the concerns from the citizens so you all knew those.
And before you do that, Nancy, just to clarify, that also becomes part of the special permitting process in terms of addressing all these issues and concerns and mitigation. So we'll hear briefly some of that now, but it will go through a much more in-depth process through that special permitting event.
Right.
Michael?
Tom, how do we get to a final route? What's the decision process on that?
Boy, I can't really speak to that. Maybe Nancy can.
We're going to walk you through today, kind of, our thought process on the 7 routes that we had submitted, and, apologize about that we had submitted to you. We're going to walk you through various reasons why some of them work and why some of them don't work. And if you want to, we can jump into that now, but we were going to address that a little bit later. And then what will happen is in this special events permit, 1 route will be submitted.
What you may not understand, Michael, is the actual application has not been submitted yet.
I understand. But the process of choosing a route, it seems to me, is vital information to us. And so to have it done at a later date or a date that's not part of the Board of County Commissioners' decision-making, that seems, I mean, I'd like to be at least co-informed of
We're
that. so.
going to address it right after we hear from the outreach.
Yeah, and I think that's what we tried to figure out which we're going to do first. An update on the public process outreach and then a discussion on the route. So we're still finishing up the public outreach, and perhaps Nancy, you can then just address and respond to some of Rob's questions then.
Absolutely. So I think as you have heard, what we heard in these HOA and Metro meetings and things like that were the concerns and the comments that you had made to us back in January. So what we heard was really reflected back on us. So, you know, the BOCC was right on target. And we believe, and again, I can talk generalities, you know, regarding parking, construction, and things like that. Without a solid route, you know, I can't say very specifically, this is going to happen at this point. But what I can tell you is, as far as parking and things like that, and neighborhoods being overrun, one of our, and again, you're going to hear me say over and over, you know, we're going to be outreaching from April through the race. And so that is, you know, our goal is really to make this such a great community event, and everybody's been informed and everybody has been able to make very informed decisions. They've been able to make their plans well ahead of time because our public outreach and our public process, you know, was so all-encompassing. So again, no parking will be no parking. If you can't park on a road right now, you won't be able to park on a road then, you know, during the bike race. That will be very clearly made. For service and construction, again, that outreach plan, you know, we hope that within a 4-month or a 4.5-month period that people can make plans and, you know, make accommodations and know that for between noon and 4 p.m. on Monday, August 19th, that those constructions, you know, I think the hospital is a great example, you know, talking to kind of their head guy, you know, he said, we can put in supplies, you know, we can build, we can get everything we need delivered to us and work on site that day. You know, that shouldn't cause us, you know, great heartburn. And so we will manage them in a way that, again, we are able to throw out very specific information. You know, when a route has been approved, we'll be able to throw out very specific information and answer very specifically. But we, you know, other than that, oh, Joe, do you want to address the 911?
I don't know what the specific question was.
Emergency response to homes. If someone calls 911, what's the protocol, just for the public's sake and for our sake?
Well, I'd have to see the route, but, you know, if it was, let's just take Independence Pass last year, we were responding to 911 calls with the race in progress. If it's a fire, ambulance, we take precedence over any bicycle.
I guess that's the words that I was looking for.
And I think
An ambulance has right-of-way over the race.
Ambulance, police car, fire truck, especially in August, I would ask to have way over any bicycles.
Gabe, would you like to add kind of anything to that?
Sure, Gabe Muthing with Aspen Ambulance. I do just want to say that, you know, as Joey said, last year was a great example of using ambulances and putting them strategically around the course, where arguably we probably provide better coverage on that day than most, just because we've got the ambulances placed strategically. Looking at all the routes this year, same thing. We really feel like that we can cover each area appropriately and provide the same level, if not better, service throughout the course, throughout the areas and communities. So.
Can I just add to that? Last year, Rob, just to put everybody's mind a little at ease, is we saved a life during the race last year. We had a 911 call or a heart attack at the top of the pass. It turned into a transport to ADH, and we did, as far as I'm concerned, and I think Gabe will agree, saved the person's life right at the height of the bike race. I think that the peloton was on the ascent of Independence Pass when this happened. So the system last year worked, at least on Independence Pass.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or questions just regarding the public process before we move into routes? Rachel?
No, just so it doesn't get lost, I'm not sure it totally fits here, but, you know, on the construction aspect, I think it strikes me as the smaller handyman than the bigger, you know, outfits that are going to need some
Right.
advance notice. And I think that we could use a resource of looking at what active building permits we have at any given time as we get to the end in August and be able to notify them through that. And then I'm not sure to Cindy and the city's building department, but to the extent they have an email list of contractors who they work with, we could really do an outreach through that way, and that way catch some of the smaller people. I know what it's like when it's like, oh, I got to go out to BMC West and get one more corner joist or something, and not be able to do it. So those are the people we need to make sure are prepared.
That's great. Thanks, Rachel.
And just to add on to that, the way we did it last year, Rachel, was that we notified contractors, general contractors, electricians, plumbers, who would come into our department, since we obviously run all the permits for your county, with flyers, with verbal communication, when they would come in to submit for permits about the bike race and its impacts. If the bike race happens from noon to 4, which I think I heard Nancy say, we might have limited inspections for that time period. But if the course opens up and we can get out there, we'll certainly do it. But that's how we kind of handled it last year. But the email list is a great idea too.
And then I guess the second is, will you have tow trucks kind of available on hand so that if people park in the wrong spots, they can be moved away, just like the city does when people park in the HOV lane after 3 o'clock, and then the buses can't use it, so.
We will, and I kind of don't want to speak on behalf of, you know, the incident management team, but that is something that kind of comes under their purview. But yes, we have the previous 2 years, and so without really speaking for a team that hasn't really come together officially, I envision that will be the same exact way we did
I
in the
mean,
past.
the hope would be no one parks illegally anyhow, on any day of the week, but that we would be prepared to make sure.
Yes, and we have in the past, and so again, I'm going to fully assume that will be absolutely in place.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions for public process, let's get into sort of the meat of the discussion, perhaps, and that's the routes. And I'm sure you'll probably come up with the recommended routes as well, and reasons why.
Yep, so kind of what I would like to do is you're going to be hearing, if it's okay with you, you're going to be hearing from Medalist Captain Duran on kind of routes, impacts, traffic flow, those sorts of things. But just to let you know, or just kind of start the conversation, is I think back in really October, Jim Burrell and I were on our bikes kind of, you know, riding around the valley and things. And so there's been probably since the middle to the end of October, a lot of hours from a lot of people really looking at this. And, you know, I can speak personally even from the time we started looking at how to connect Aspen and Snowmass and what that was going to look like. Personally, I was speaking about, I think same as you had in mind, George, you know, some laps up in Snowmass, you know, using that hill and coming down, and wouldn't that be exciting and things like that. And, you know, until the Medalist guys kind of came along and said, you know, here's why that won't work and how that won't work. So there's been a lot of thought process involved in this, a lot of, you know, looking at things one way and looking at it the other way. And so just, I just want to let you know that there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of thought in that. With that, Chuck, do you want to move over?
Good afternoon, I'm Chuck Hodge. I'm the technical director of the event. I work for Medalist Sports out of Atlanta, Georgia. And Nancy's going to pass around a couple of updated packets. What I want to do today is just talk through some of our discussions, what we looked at. Nancy and the local organizing committee took some input from you, the community, other user groups, and submitted those back to us, really to talk about since your last meeting, to look at an appropriate route for the event. I want to talk through some of the logistics of this to give you an idea of what we looked at. We weigh a lot of different things when we look at these routes. Everything from a great TV shot of the area to community safety, the ability to flow traffic. Of course, we want a great competition course. And I think we've come up with a course that as best we can serves those needs. So I'll sort of focus in on that and then talk through a little bit of the logistics of what you can expect hopefully to see during the race that day, and see if we can generate some questions back out of that. And then really to serve as a resource for you all if you have any questions about the race and the operations in general, I'm here to answer. In front of you have several packets. We're going to be coming back to option 1 with a little variation. We looked at several options, knowing that I think from you all's point of view, there's a lot of interest in keeping the positive impact going and trying to reduce that negative impact. So that's one thing we definitely focused in on. We do have some rules and some international regulations that we're required to follow as well. Several of the courses utilized Highway 82 pretty heavily. And I think, and hopefully you all agree, we wanted to avoid that as much as possible just due to the impact of the ingress and egress. And I'll talk about a couple ways with option 1. We've even lessened that since the package you see in front of you and the map you see in front.
Can I interrupt you here
Sure.
real quick? One of the things we did here when we met with the airport, the hospital, and RAFTA, and again, if you want to ask any of them directly, they're here. But one of the things we did hear from them is they think it's a great community event, they like the event, but in order to keep them and be supportive and keep their entities viable, the airport and, you know, the hospital and RAFTA, that really the race needed to stay away from Highway 82. So that we needed to be able to keep access for RAFTA and to the airport and to the hospital. And so that's that was kind of a lot of our push and conversation too, was, you know, those entities are obviously extremely important to our community. And so I just wanted to interrupt.
Great, thanks, Nancy. We also had some suggestions for some loops to go out, do various loops, and come back in. In the last few years, internationally, there have been some issues with that, and our international governing body has passed some regulations in the last few years addressing our ability to go out and do circuits during or at the finish specifically of a race. They tend me to be a worst-case scenario kind of guy, and we'll talk about the logistics of this in a bit, but what we could run into in that situation is what we call a breakaway of riders ahead of the main group, or dropped riders who come off the group, basically running in the head-to-tail scenario in a lot of those situations. A 3-mile lap, which I think was looked up in Snowmass Village, we can ride that in 6 minutes. So if we end up with 10 minutes of riders, that's going to create some issues for us. In addition, we have a pretty extensive caravan of vehicles ahead and behind that will add several minutes to that buffer. So that created some real logistical issues for us. It also creates some traffic issues, and I think it'll be more relevant when I talk about the larger loop. It actually impedes our ability to flow traffic on specific sections of the course, because instead of coming around once every hour, we're now hitting that area every few minutes, and does not allow us to flow traffic as well. So we took a lot of these items into consideration and really looked back at our race option 1, which you all see on the cover of your packet. One thing we did change, we drove it again last night just to confirm it, is the section of Brush Creek where we were going to take a left on 82. Nancy has worked with the neighborhood, which are private roads at Medicine Bow and Upper Ranch, to allow us to use that neighborhood, Medicine Bow and Upper Ranch Road, which will actually drop us off where we can cross directly over 82. And that should really allow the State Patrol to free up that ingress-egress on 82. It's much easier logistically to cross the course than when we are on the course moving along it, or on 82 moving along it. They could actually send cars across using their staff between groups of riders, for instance, if we got a 10-minute break, is an example of what we looked at there. To give you an idea of sort of how this would operate race day, we are looking at 3 laps of this is the current thought. This is about a 22-mile lap. It'll take, depending on the speed we ride, 50 to 55 minutes to do a lap of this. First lap, everybody's together. We're probably, when you include the buffer ahead and behind of State Patrol and other vehicles, looking at about a 5 to 10 minute window depending on which section of the course. Now as we move throughout the day and throughout the race, not everyone can keep up with the leaders, else we wouldn't have bike racing out there. We've actually crafted this route to try to make it competitive, but not end up with riders scattered all over this course. For instance, we did look in that private neighborhood at going up Medicine Bow, putting a really hard climb in there. We've decided to probably take that out, mainly to keep it competitive, but also keep it within reason. Again, they pay me to do worst case. I'm thinking last lap, from lead police vehicle to follow police vehicle with all the riders in between, probably worst case, we'd be looking at a 20-minute window there. I think realistically, we're looking at more of the 10 to 15-minute window, if not less. And just to give you an idea, when we're looking at a 50-minute lap, we're looking at probably a 20-minute impact during that lap. So during the 3.5 hours of the race, there will be the ability to move the citizenry, the handyman, whoever else around this course. What we really are digging into with the details once this is finalized is the best way to do that. And there will be some restrictions on movement that day. If the race is coming at your driveway and you live on Owl Creek Road, you're not going to be able to move right at it without getting hindered. However, and this will be part of the initial PR effort, we can flow traffic away from the race, as an example, up until our lead command car gets there. Then you may be waiting 10 or 15 minutes to leave your house, and then you can pull in behind the interconvoy vehicle we use and follow it around until you're off the course. So there are, most of the areas we've looked at really do give us the ability to flow traffic around the course. The logistics of that, again, are going to come once we get some feedback from you all on the approval and sort of the go forward on this. We can dig into those details and submit those with the special event permit. So I think from our end, we would like to look at this option one. I think it makes the most sense when you look at that balance of all the different items involved. I'd be happy to answer some questions or concerns from you all on that or any of the other routes that you've seen.
Questions? Rob?
My first question is, what portion, obviously the city of Aspen, but there's probably some other areas that are going to be permanent closures for the day. And it'd be nice, specifically in the special event permit, to have those designated, whether it's the snowmass area, if there are certain parts. I mean, I know it sounds like most of the residential area, you're going to have a 20-minute closure, worst case scenario, to wait for the race go by. Obviously, you're going to have sweep to make sure those cars get off the road somewhere. So that's a logistical thing, but we really need to see a map that has the permanent closures designated.
Sure.
And as part of the outreach and part of the packet.
Absolutely. And we've actually initially worked on some maps. I'm going to tell you at this point, without having sat down with the detail of this route, that I think most of the portions in the county, there will not be any permanent closures. I think most of that we are looking at in the city. There will be some restrictions and certain directions that will actually make it faster for folks to travel in, and those will certainly need to be communicated. We've started to talk about those, but I don't see any outside of the city itself, any real lasting hour-plus type closures. It'll mainly be this rolling closure we're talking about.
Other questions at this point?
I would just comment, I think that the effort to minimize the use of Highway 82 is really significant. And to, maintain as best as possible that access for the airport. And so, to the extent that Brush Creek Village is going to become part of the course, and that accommodates that, I can really see a much simpler route evolving out of this longer discussion we've been having.
Steve?
I wanted to confirm, you mentioned the Upper Ranch Road and the Brush Creek Village subdivision. And is that the route that you're talking about, starting out Medicine Bow and then cutting right over on the Upper Ranch Road?
Is that?
Yes, sir. We actually discussed this last night, and to give you an idea of some of the things we were talking about with that. Initially, we had talked about going in and making the left up Medicine Bow and doing the long climb up. For a variety of reasons, we thought, number one, some neighborhood impact. When you throw a big, long climb, we may have more folks in there than they really want in there. It also really creates a much harder route. And I think we'd come out of that with riders, not necessarily in that 10 to 15 minute window. So we did drive that last night to confirm that, and correct, we'll go up, make the right turn, and stay on that Upper Ranch Road. It really does reduce the climb, and then take that back out.
I drove that yesterday also, and I thought it's crazy to go way up there, even though it's like beautiful views of
Right.
the mountains back there. But then there's what look like really dangerous switchbacks all the way down. And going that other route, you're just basically taking the bicycles off of Highway 82 and they're up on the hill right above Highway 82. And you have a minimal of climbing and a minimal of bad switchback kind of things on the way down.
And it gives us that straight crossing, which is really what we were looking for.
I have a couple of questions for some of our public safety officials here. Maybe I'll start with our, the State Patrol. Is it Captain Durant?
Yeah, I'm Captain Durant.
Durant, thank you for coming today. I'd like to just get your feedback. The crossing of Highway 82 and Smith Hill Road, as you know, is probably the most dangerous, one of the most, if not the most dangerous intersection on Highway 82. You've got cars traveling 60, 65, regardless of the speed limit. And then you've got people trying to egress and ingress off of Smith Hill without any, any lights or anything. So I'm sure you're aware of how dangerous that intersection is. And now you've got a series of laps going through, and where you may have up to, worst case scenario, maybe 20-minute delay between riders. So how would that, you really feel that you're going to monitor that? And then also, what do you see the impact in terms of how that traffic will start to back up perhaps down valley into the canyon?
Well, Chuck did an outstanding job explaining how this caravan goes along the route, and we certainly support him and Medalist and all the local agencies here to provide EMS support, and we work very good with everybody in the room. As far as Smith Hill, Highway 2, Juniper Hill, that is a very dangerous intersection, we know that. The plus side of this whole thing is we have staff that's going to be at those intersections and provide traffic control and enough support. So as traffic starts to back up there, we can mitigate that by putting some warning devices out there, have troopers out there slowing people down as they come into the closure. I don't really see a huge issue with traffic safety there, just because we'll have so much staff on board to make sure that the cyclists can get through that area safely, and in turn make the motorists, the travel for the motoring public very safe.
And then how do you see, because you're still on Highway 82, in terms of when the racers are coming through the roundabout, and again, you've got that possible delay of up to 20 minutes between riders, and the roundabout obviously is sort of a bottleneck there as you're coming across Maroon Creek Bridge.
Right, and we plan to stage troopers at the roundabout, at Owl Creek Road, in at Aspen. I think the next one down is Harmony, is that the next one? Harmony? And on the way down to monitor this traffic backup. So as traffic on 82 is going to Aspen at the roundabout, if it's backing up to the point where it's going to affect the traffic light, it's a mere communication process. Okay, now we're going to start the stage closure here, monitor the backup, and it keeps going back and back and back. Just like every single major intersection along that highway will be staffed with a bunch of troopers to monitor that, and the communication for us is really key. So when it starts to back up, notify that next staging point to start that closure, and it continues to fall back.
So you don't see a tremendous delay for people trying to get in and out of town during these? I mean, there'll be enough, you feel there would be enough gaps in between to be able to move traffic in and out of town through the roundabout and across the Castle Creek Bridge?
Well, there'll be some delay, as we do the 3 laps and the 20 minutes, and we all realize how traffic kind of backs up there, and it continues to increase the longer we do this. I think with some of the public messaging we have set out and our staging points, we're going to tend to minimize that as much as possible. We do understand there's going to be some delay on Highway 82.
Yeah. Joey, you have any other things to add to that?
No, I think Captain Duran and the State Patrol are experts at this, and I'd say if they're telling us one thing, we should pretty much count on it. Our relationship is excellent.
We did also talk and go over this whole plan with the Department of Transportation, and anytime we do any kind of impact on the state highway, we run it through them to make sure we didn't miss anything, solicit their input, and I have discussed this with the engineers down in Grand Junction. And as we continue with the process, we'll do the best thing we can to mitigate the traffic backups into town.
Okay. Rachel?
Well, just a kind of small detail based on what you said is we should really double check to make sure we have radio communications or cell phones throughout the entire route, because we have some dead spots that we've been working with. So as long as we're sure that all those posts will really be in communication.
Yeah, we work off a DTR coverage area, and it's pretty solid along this whole course. But if we don't, we fall back on a simplex channel, line of sight, where as long as I can see you and that patrol car's down there, the communication is good.
Michael?
How are spectators, if we're not going to park on the roads, and how are spectators going to be distributed along the site? Because they're going to, and I don't even know where the best viewing areas are, but people will find out and try to get to those areas. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, generally, there's a few places we can always count on spectators. I think you all have seen this a little the last couple of years. One is certainly the start-finish area downtown. Really the uphills. They like to watch bike racers suffer. So they're going to go the uphills where they're going slow. We've had some preliminary discussions. Again, we have not set the detail on this because we didn't have a final route to work with. But certainly talking to Snowmass Village, we are going to have some activities up in the village. We have a King of the Mountain Point at the top of the climb, which awards some points toward a jersey. That will be an area and working with them on where we're going to put all the people. One thing with this event is this is a very active crowd that comes in. I think the point of using the bike trails to get people out and about is a very good one, and we'll certainly push that. And more importantly, where we don't want people to park, our website is a really good asset for that. We've generally created for each stage sort of a list of do's and don'ts. And as we develop those, working with the organizing committee, we will push them for that. I don't have all that detail for you today. Again, we're working on finalizing this course and then getting into that, but I certainly don't see any deal breakers we can't work around from our end on this.
The time allotment right now is 12 to 4. I think Rob may have asked this earlier, but how much time prior and after do you anticipate in terms of impeding any traffic coming in and out of town?
Really, we give you 12 to 4 as a worst case. We are looking actual race time probably at about 12:30 to 3:45 for race time. So that 12 to 4 adds in the captain getting his folks out on course. And remember, this is a bit of a bubble. So as we're moving around this, for instance, as we move up Owl Creek Road, we'll be through there at 3:20 the last time, and we'll be able to free that up for things to start flowing. So that 4-hour period, again, is a bit of a worst case. It's actually going to be quite a bit less than that. We're probably going to be looking at a 3-hour to 3-hour and 15 race time. From our end, and I think from the agency's end, working with State Patrol quite extensively over the last few years, there's really no need, for instance, the crossing of Highway 82 at Smith Hill, there's no need to do anything with that until the race is almost there. So it would take us, if we start at 3:30, we won't be around there until almost 4 o'clock. There's no need to do anything there until we get there. So the window is going to be a little smaller. I think that 4-hour for publication and for working on the permit, et cetera, is probably that time window we want to go with. If that answers that.
Okay, thank you. Steve, and then Rob.
Are you looking at doing a 3-lap race of, if that option 1 would be 21.5 to maybe 22 miles, doing a little bit through Rush Creek Village, but so would you'd be doing 3 laps, so it'd be around a 66-mile race?
Correct,
Is that
sir.
what you're looking at?
We are going to do a couple of very short neutral laps downtown, and these are about a mile, mile and a half just in that downtown closure area, and then head out to do 3 of these larger laps. So that timing's about right. I've actually run the distance. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's just under 22 miles for a complete lap with that Brush Creek in there, and we figure that's going to be about that 50-minute time frame per lap. And again, that's going to depend on how fast they ride. I mean, it's everything from what you ate to breakfast to what the weather's like, depending on whether we're going to race 22 or 28 miles an hour that day.
Rob?
One of the questions, going back to kind of what George said about closures that I raised, is really about downtown Aspen and the business community. I also own a restaurant in downtown Aspen, so it's one of my concerns, but it concerns a lot of people that work in those restaurants and that sort of thing. We've got a race the next day, too, leaving Aspen. So, are they going to keep barriers up? Are they going to allow traffic to be free-flowing at, say, 5 o'clock that night? I mean, I think last year it was a 6 o'clock thing, and it ended up in some places being 6:30 for various areas of Aspen. But I think that's crucial for our nighttime business for this transition, to have a goal set for free flow traffic in downtown Aspen. And I don't know if the race teams are going to go back up to Snowmass, because my understanding they're going to be stationed primarily in Snowmass, which I think is a great thing. But having that plan as part of it, what stays from day 1 to day 2? Because we haven't even seen day 2 race yet, which is pretty clear. It's probably like it was before, a couple loops and then up over Independence Pass. But that information, I think, is crucial.
A couple of answers for you there. One is the teams will be up at Snowmass is the latest we have. And we talked about that this morning. Our feeling is we will have them bring the buses down in the morning of day 1, not put them down there the night before, just be part of the expo and festival downtown. After the race, they would actually leave and go back up and come back down the next morning. And we'd probably use different parking areas. So what you had is an overnight. That was more of a logistical issue of not having room at hotels in town to put them at. And that's been fixed with the move to Snowmass. For the opening of the roads between the 2 days, it's a great question. It's very complicated. We spent 2 hours working on that this morning. What I will tell you is our infrastructure that we use mainly for the finish has to go away anyway, because it's going to be used down the road the next day. We have one set of stuff for the finish. Now there will be some start infrastructure. Those locations are going to move. I cannot give you a direct answer right now of A versus B. We did go through a pretty extensive timeline this morning, but certainly those will be items we'll take into consideration. You will see definitely a collapse of the closure as quickly as we can do so. We tend to start on one block and we build outward, and then we collapse that back down as quickly as possible. It's in our best interest to get gone as well, because we have to build all this the next day for our finish. So we can pass that on, and I'm sure Nancy and you'll see have copious notes from this morning that we'll pass on to that.
And the point is the business don't thrive very well if there's no parking, because then the word gets out that people don't come to town. People don't dine at my restaurant if they're not going to have parking, a good number of them. So that's crucial. Back to the route, one of the things that I had asked for the last meeting, which I don't want a digital, analysis of this, but, I think it'd be good for the public to have an estimated, this is that 20-minute part of the course that's going to be occupied for every 15 minutes, so that they can see, an estimate over those, if it's 3 laps at 55 minutes, 3 hours worth of race time, when their closures are going to happen, because people are going to be timing flights, appointments, those sorts of things. I think that would be a good thing to see in the permit process and in the outreach process. The other thing that I think is crucial is to have a worst-case scenario for people going from Independence Pass or that side of Aspen to Glenwood Springs, because you're really looking at 3 sections of your route where this loop is going to cross through. So it could be like driving through a town where you hit every red light, and it's 20 minutes at every red light, so that's an hour right there. Is that, and you're the expert in terms of how fast various parts of this course they're traveling on. Hopefully we can sync those lights up a little bit so that, hopefully that's the way it washes out, I'm going to say. Because
they don't hit the closure every time.
I'm pretty happy with this course race. I think it's going to have its challenges, but I think we're the community that can meet those challenges. And I'll say it again and again, this is a fabulous thing for our community. So I don't want anybody in the public or the press to think that us critiquing this means that we don't think it's a fabulous thing.
It certainly made us take a hard look at this route and come up with some changes to it, which we appreciate. To address your 2 questions, yes, we can easily generate that document. Matter of fact, we do it anyway for race fans, and we can tweak what we call our course log, our basic course log, just a little bit. It may get to the last lap of it looks worse than it is, but we will explain that in the document. One item that hadn't been brought brought up is we have a very good partnership, as the captain mentioned, with CDOT, to the point they've created a special website for this event as part of their co-trip website. We will certainly utilize that very heavily. They've done a fantastic job, if you all have not seen that in the past, about talking about these closure times, and not only what to avoid, but how you can move, to your point earlier about getting downtown. We want fans to come in, and I'm sure you want folks to come in and do their business anyway. And we've worked pretty hard to push that message as well.
Other questions or comments? Michael and Steve?
So this race option one that we look at and that everybody seems happy with, is that going to be submitted to our special events?
We would really want feedback from you all, and it sounds like everybody is relatively happy with that. So yes, we'd like to pursue that one and submit it back.
Steve?
Well, just immediate feedback to you, that Route 1 going through Brush Creek Village is what I had decided would be the best because it's the least amount of traffic on Highway 82. And it seems like it's a good challenging race and lots of good spectator viewpoints. I know most of the comments from the different subdivisions along that route were pretty positive, that they were actually excited to have it go through their neighborhood, and some people were sort of doing block parties or viewing parties at their properties so they you know, all their friends could be over at one spot to watch, and they wouldn't be traveling, they'd be waiting for the race to come back by a couple of times. But following this route, do you see any problems, or maybe Tom, would you see any problems on the neighborhoods that this is going through on this preferred option?
You know, I really don't, actually. I kind of agree with you in the fact that it minimizes the use of Highway 82, which is a good thing. There are some areas where, you know, there's kind of some steep slopes that people may have the tendency to climb up on to get better views, you know, things like that, that of course can be managed with fencing and signage and that sort of thing, but that's really the only thing I see.
On the start of the race, and Rob touched on this a little bit earlier, but I remember last year we had in town, you had the ladies doing a criteria, and we had a bunch of other events that really did block off downtown for the day. And we haven't really talked about that. I'm sure it's going to be part of the special event permit, but I'm just curious. Are you looking at doing some criteria for ladies or other events either in town or up at Snowmass on either of these days?
We're looking at doing some weekend events in Snowmass. As far as Monday and Tuesday proper, really before the race, we're not looking at doing any ancillary events. So we're not, as of this moment, we are absolutely not looking at a women's race or anything like that. I think with the impacts and the excitement of having a start finish and basically a start, that we really feel that we're going to capture people's attention, and you know, instead of just waiting for them to kind of finish, which is what we've done in the past, we just feel like we have such an exciting event that we're already hosting. So we may do some things in between laps, but those would be already within the natural closure.
And then as part of the special event permitting process, we're looking at, specifically we're talking right now about this specific route, but of course on the next day where the riders will be going over Independence Pass, we'll be providing comments in terms of, again, road closure, certainly the issues in terms of camping and parking up at the pass, which was an issue last year. So that will become part of that public process through the special event permitting. Mike, you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct. We'll flush all that out at the special event permit application process.
And again, that will be, again, it will be vetted, there'll be a public process for that as well.
That's correct, yeah.
Rachel, and then Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I recall last year as I was traveling a bit around the state, seeing all the variable message signs everywhere in the state talking about upcoming closures, delays, and things like that. So I think that's been a really good investment in public communication. Are there going to be, or should there be, some additional street sweeping or maintenance or issues like that on this route in order to prepare it for the riders?
Yes, ma'am. The route's in very good shape. One reason we're looking at this route in particular. We will drive it once there's not snow on it every time I come out and take a hard look at and talk to the appropriate agency. We're not looking at a repaving process, but certainly for all of us, if someone runs into a pothole and crashes, it's not good.
Right.
So we're going to investigate those. Usually what we've done is asked the particular agency possibly to move their street sweeping up a few days to hit that, or if we see a really dangerous area to go in and remediate that for us.
Yeah, because, last year we were able to talk to CDOT about the pass route, and I particularly brought up the concern that they really needed some work there, and so they had some crews out there. I don't know that, these are all county roads or city roads. They're not the same resource base to be able to make those improvements, and that would be kind of important as to, how much is being expected, and that's good maintenance anyhow if you got, your road deteriorating, but that may be a budgetary issue if that falls back to the county on preparing its roads, or whatever snowmass its roads. And I'm not so sure we really have a sweeper of the capacity to do all of the McLean Flats and Smith Hill roadway, so we really would have to coordinate with the city in sharing its sweeper and those obligations.
And we find too, we flush them with water trucks, and that almost works better than the sweeper a lot of times.
Well, water might be in short supply this summer. And the last would be, just kind of following up on Rob's comment about parking, and just something for the city to consider, but perhaps that first night you really could promote free parking in the garage after 5 p.m. or something like that. So, people realize that there is going to be a good option for them if they decide to come into town to shop or walk the sidewalks or eat out or things like that.
I think the difference you're going to see from last year to this year with the overall start is last year what we saw is the riders coming over Independence Pass and kind of zigzagging through town and coming onto Main Street. We're not going to have that zigzag through town this year. So, where we saw a lot of kind of that orange fence and no parking and things, we don't anticipate that magnitude of an impact, especially in the core of town.
But it would be set up for the next morning when they do the few laps before leaving.
We're talking about, we're looking into, we're discussing, ways to minimize that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Michael, I'll get you, Joy.
What about helicopter filming of the event? Is that going to occur? And how
I'm
is it
defer to my boss, Mr. Jim Burrell, who's here. He handles more of the TV than
Yeah, again, like the last 2 years, we'll be broadcasting live to over 160 countries the last 2 hours of the race. And we do that through our 3 camera bikes that are transmitting to our fixed-wing aircraft well above 10,000 feet. And then in addition to that, we do have our helicopter that will be following the race those last 2 hours, broadcasting that signal back to the finish line and then ultimately into our broadcast package. It won't be on the second day because we will only pick it up 2 hours from our estimated time of finish.
So there's a helicopter on this route? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So essentially from 145 to 345, we will have a helicopter up with a camera ball on it, capturing the images of this stage.
So can I jump in, Michael? Jim Elwood, how is that going to affect the airport and airspace? Because now you've got a helicopter cruising around right over our airspace versus last year or versus just going over the pass.
When it's one of the issues we've been targeting to look at, we'll be in touch with the FAA, who handles airspace and air traffic control, here during the application phase, and make sure their comments are included in the response as it comes through from the airport back to ComDev. So we tried to outreach to air traffic this week and didn't wasn't able to connect with them. So we'll have further comments as part of the package reply.
So that, it ends up being under the FAA.
Correct. The FAA controls
Decision.
airspace, and
Decision
so
terms of-
anything that's not touching the ground at the airport is under the purview of the Federal Aviation Administration. So we'll make sure to coordinate through the airport's comments, their thoughts as well, or ask them to reply directly.
And we're in constant communications with the tower. I mean, we have to file our flight pattern prior to the race commencing and working directly with the tower, and in this case with the circuit race. You know, just both our fixed wing aircraft, which I have to believe that would be way out of approach into Aspen, and then our helicopter, you know, because of the elevation, will most certainly be in contact with the tower.
What is the elevation of the helicopter?
1,000 feet above 1,000 feet above ground.
Joey, did you have a comment earlier or on this?
A question is what I have for whoever can answer. I don't know if it will come into effect or not as far as camping goes on this route. You know, we've had issues in the past. There is a camping ordinance the county has. Is there any reason to believe people will camp, and if so, what will you do about the camping ordinance?
I don't see an issue. I don't see that it's going to be an issue, but I think we go with the ordinances it sets and not let them do it on this circuit. Obviously, independence has been a different issue. It's been stated or addressing that. We had one of our Forest Service meetings this morning, for instance, to start that dialogue, and that's a little bit of a separate. I don't see it as a huge issue on a route like this.
Steve?
I'm wondering if you have any special accommodations for additional buses from RAFTA and possibly from Snowmass Village Shuttle are both going to be impacted by this. But I could see a lot of people wanting to park farther down valley, ride the RAFTA bus up, and do you have any projections on how many thousands of people there are going to be? Is this going to be like a Labor Day festival?
You know,
how many, are we going to have to add extra buses on?
We
That
started
sort of
that
thing.
conversation, but again, really, you know, we need to get a route, we need to get an approved route. And then once we get an approved route, we really dig into the meat of the issue. I do anticipate putting on extra buses. I think we've, you know, just thrown that idea out. But again, you know, we're kind of, you know, we need to get a route. We need to get a route approval, and then we can make those plans.
Would, kind of adding on to that, if there are sort of designated viewing areas, which is a possibility, or places that you know that more people are going to want to go there, but there's no car parking there, maybe special buses just to deliver people to those designated spots would be in order.
Yep. We utilized CME and everything last year too, so yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I'll just make some comments. I'm pleased with the way this route has changed, getting off of Highway 82 and hearing the State Patrol, knowing that they're going to manage that one intersection at Smith Hill and Brush Creek. So that's great. And I'm also pleased that you've cut down the number of laps as well to help mitigate some of these traffic delays, potential delays as well. I think that the challenge will be to continue to get word out to the community. You know, the roundabout will still pose a challenge of its own, as it does on every day coming in and out of town. So this will just exacerbate it a little bit more. I think the other challenge will be for RAFTA, frankly, who likes to run their buses like a Swiss train to enable them to be able to keep moving and moving passengers and people in and out of town. So I think this is great, and I applaud you for all the public input process, Tom, and I was pleasantly surprised that there were so many positive, and virtually I didn't see any negative comments at all through all of these neighborhoods, which surprised me, and that speaks very loud in terms of, I think, what the community sees as a very exciting and valuable special event for our community. So thank you. Rob?
Just going to repeat it as my last words. I think this is a fabulous thing for our community. Brings a lot of great people in. It promotes us worldwide. We actually have Vermont Bike Tours coming, a new route that they've never done before, coming through Aspen. 14 weekends, 25 people each weekend. And so I'm fabulous to see that that's the first time for them to come through this area. They're doing a trip from here to Vail, and I'm sure that's because, or partially because, of the bike race. So it's just the start of this being a premier. We've always known we're a premier biking community, but this is a fabulous thing for our community. And our job as commissioners is to critique, as the paper said, again and again and again. That's not a bad thing. We still love this bike race, so.
Does that Vermont bike?
They don't have a special permit?
Special
No,
permit?
exactly.
We were just asking that, George.
Well, I'm hoping-
Less than 20 people, only one car?
Michael?
So is the feeling of the board that this is the preferred route with the diversion through Brush Creek subdivision? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm supporting it.
I'm supporting it.
Yeah, I think we heard some of the reasons, although, broadly expressed in narrative as to why the other ones were not either acceptable to the international racing rules or to the safety of the riders and things like that. And I would just like to say I appreciate you taking the time to vet those and take a look at those. It's very important as we express to the public why there are some delays or some, little consternation, is that we really looked at everything possible to minimize the impacts. So, yeah, I'm supportive of this route.
I mean, I just wanted to get a clear message to
Yeah,
the board,
sure.
that's all.
So we'll hear from
It has kind of related to that, the only other route that you call it the Glendale option, which would be an up and back on Owl Creek Road. And I presume you don't want an up and back on the same road is probably, you have guidelines about that, I'm sure.
We do, yeah, and that was what sort of killed that one off in the regulations.
Yeah, and that's the only other one of the options here that looked like it even, had possibilities.
So you supportive of this route?
I would support the preferred one that they've given.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I think, because we had some concerns, we've ended up with a better proposal than we initially got, much better. And I think staying away from Highway 82 is going to allow the circulation of traffic in the valley. It's going to be delayed, but it's going to be much better than occupying both 82 and McLean Flats Road. I'm concerned about helicopter flights in neighborhoods, but I guess the FAA will deal with that, so.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for all your work and for coming. Thank you, Nathan.
We're running right ahead of schedule.
We have a lot of discussion.
Grassroots?
Running way ahead of schedule.
Let's take a 5-minute break while we clear the room.
We have a break scheduled.
Yeah, but we'll start to see, we're ahead of schedule. Next on our agenda are memos of interest. John?
Yeah, we have one memo of interest for you. It is a budget supplemental request for the Tie Bar Trail Corridor acquisition and trail construction. Tomorrow, you'll have a ordinance authorizing signature of a contract for this acquisition in front of you. Today, we have in front of you the budgetary side. The supplemental appropriation is for $700,000 to come from parks dedication fees, which is one of our reserved fund balances in the general fund. The purpose of the appropriation is to acquire a trail easement, not a trail easement, a trail parcel, I'm sorry, along Prince Creek. It'll allow for approximately 1 mile of trail to be constructed along Prince Creek Road up to the Hayes parcel. The remainder of the funding would be used for associated acquisition costs, which we're estimating at $5,000, and then any remainder would be used for the actual trail construction. I do have a map I can show you, but you're also going to see that tomorrow when we talk about the actual contract. This is following up on an agreement that the board entered into on January 8th with Two Shoes Ranch, whereby Two Shoes put into escrow $700,000 that could be used in one of 3 ways, and the first way was acquisition and development of this trail parcel. The way the agreement is written is that if the Sooty Two Shoes land exchange does get approved by the Bureau of Land Management, the full $700,000 would be reimbursed by those funds that are currently in escrow. If the county acquires the trail parcel, but the land exchange is not approved, the agreement has a provision that the county would be reimbursed half the acquisition cost. So that is why you see 2 scenarios on this MOI in terms of revenues that obviously if the land exchange does go through, we would anticipate being reimbursed the whole $700,000 that is part of this appropriation. If not, we'd be reimbursed half of the $675,000, which is the second scenario that you see. These are obviously worst case scenarios. It could be that if we acquire the property that we transfer it to open space and trails, and then any associated costs with trail development and such would be there. So that is the request on the table. You will also be seeing, as I mentioned at the outset, a first reading of an ordinance to authorize the chair to sign a contract for acquisition.
Any questions for John? Michael?
John, didn't we get an appraisal on this property?
Yeah, this property had been, we had approved contracting for this property as well as the bullpen parcel previously through open space and trails. That contract did have an appraisal contingency in it. The trail corridor at that time was appraised at $266,000, not including any acquisition costs. That is one of the reasons I think the proponents stepped in as they saw a higher value associated with the trail corridor because it connected into properties that would be part of the land exchange and that are currently being used to access the crown. But yes, there was a previous appraisal and it is for $266,000.
So this is approximately what, two and a half times that appraisal?
This the purchase price that the proponents of the land exchange were supporting with these dollars is $409,000 higher than our appraisal. Yes.
And so, I mean, one of the reasons I had asked for an appraisal was that I didn't want to overpay for trail acquisition. I didn't think the county wanted to overpay. Why are we now in the position of essentially overpaying for this?
Well, I think in this case, we've had a private landowners come in and entered an agreement with the county to provide funding to purchase this parcel in particular, because we did not make the decision to expend those taxpayer dollars from the Open Space and Trails Fund for this trail corridor.
But at this time, aren't we asking for funds from our parks dedication? I mean, we're not receiving $700,000 now from the Wexners, are we?
We would receive half the purchase price back. So we would receive the $337,500 upon acquisition, and then upon approval, if the land exchange is approved by the BLM, and we would not know that until the summer. If it is approved, the remainder would be reimbursed. If it's not approved, the remainder would not be reimbursed.
Other questions?
I'm supportive of the supplemental.
Okay.
I'm supportive.
I can't be supportive. I wasn't supportive of the Wexner Exchange. I didn't think that was a good idea, giving away public lands. And that now that it leads to essentially what I view as an over expenditure, even if it is going to be reimbursed, it still sets a precedent for the acquisition of trails within Pickens County, that Pickens County is willing to overpay. And just because it's tied to the Wexner Land Exchange, which is near and dear to the heart of the rest of the commissioners here, I can't possibly support that. And this is a further sort of, as far as I'm concerned, muddying of the waters of how we spend our money. So I can't support it.
Okay, Steve?
One question. Originally, wasn't there a higher amount that was offered to the Dancingers or to Tybar Ranch for the land? And what was that amount?
That is correct. The original amount was $750,000 was the original contract amount. We have a negotiated sale price of $675,000, so there's been a small reduction in the trail corridor price.
And this, the $700,000, that includes the bullpen property and the trail?
It does not include the bullpen property. That would be acquired separately through Open Space and Trails. This is just the trail corridor.
Okay. And what's the price on the bullpen property? Or the negotiated?
Yeah, it is at the appraisal, which is $570,000, I believe. They're still working on that through Open Space and Trails.
Okay. And the bullpen parcel would be used for parking, which would alleviate the parking problem at the entrance to the Handy Drive?
Is
that the plan?
That is the plan, is that be developed for parking. There's also some riparian areas and such that would be restored there.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on that. I'm supportive of the project. I was thinking that this included the bullpen property, though, was the only thing.
No, and you'll see that tomorrow too, but it is just the roughly, I believe it's 10 acres that make up the trail corridor. Then the bullpen is a separate 4-acre parcel.
I mean, this acquisition, this purchase price is really being subsidized by a private entity. And if that exchange does not go through, and if we end up purchasing this trail, the worst case scenario is that we're at this point purchasing $71,500 above appraised value, which I don't think is that off kilter for a public amenity. So I'm supporting it. Okay, I guess we move on to future agendas.
Yeah, give me just a sec. So I don't have a whole lot on future agendas. We still have now 2 requests that we're working on. One is an update on the CCRC project, which we'll work to get scheduled. I did want to visit with BOCC but before scheduling that, just to understand their timelines and decision-making process. We're also had a request from Rob to schedule just an update on WeCycle, which is a project that we had provided funding for. It's supposed to be up and running this summer, so we will work on getting those scheduled at a future meeting. So you'll see some of the empty spots starting to fill up. The only other change I wanted to note for you is on March 26th, we had a discussion on community development fees scheduled. I was going to be out that day, and we felt that it'd be important for me as well as ComDev staff to be there, and so we'll probably move that back 1 week or so into April 2nd. We have some open time slots there. And then may schedule one of the other updates that I just mentioned.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, the one question I have, it's on the page marked Tuesday, April 2nd, but at the bottom there it says Wednesday, April 3rd, the emergency management for elected officials class, and it now says PM, and at least in my calendar previously, I had 12:30 down, so I don't know what time that is or
Yeah,
where
I've
it's
got
going
to
to be.
get the exact time for that. Let me see.
I mean, it could be 12:30 p.m., but it just doesn't say, and
Yeah.
so the wheres and whens on that will be helpful in the future.
April 3rd?
Yeah, it's April 3rd that we have that.
Oh, afternoon, I think it's 12:30 or 1.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's 12:30, but we'll confirm that.
And
for you.
we'll confirm where
Yeah.
it's going to happen.
Is it still, well, I wrote down eligible fire, is it still scheduled for there?
It does look like we've got all elected officials now from Aspen, Snowmass, and
Invited.
Picking County signed up, as well as some of the fire district board members. And Eagle County, 2 Eagle County commissioners also.
Anybody else have anything on future agendas? John, on March 26th, it may be too early for the assessor to let us know, but we've got abatements scheduled, and sometimes, depending on the number of abatements, we may be able to adjust as we get closer. Okay, with that, we'll move on to open discussion.
Yeah, you probably all saw this. We have a RFP out right now on space planning. That's obviously an issue that I think the city of Aspen is going to want to talk to us about at our next joint meeting because of some of the press coverage that we've gotten recently. But just so the board's aware, what we're doing with the space planning at this point is really looking at this facility as well as the footprints that we've identified are available for development to see how space might be better utilized and projected out into the future. It would be a departure from obviously the previous facilities master plan that was adopted. I think we've reached the conclusion just isn't going to be feasible to purchase the land and do the development to make happen. And so that would include an analysis of this facility and whether it's feasible to remodel it to meet our civic and departmental needs going into the future, as well as a building envelope that exists in this back parking lot, which could be an addition or even a separate building, but would most likely be an addition that wraps around and frames in the Veterans Park here. And so that's going to be an effort that will be ongoing probably through the summer, working with departments and really refining our projections and hopefully identifying, we have placed some funding in our future capital plans to be able to do some facility improvements. Not construction of new facilities, but if there's remodels that help us utilize our space better, we have some funding for that, and we're hoping these studies will help us identify those opportunities. Do we know when when that RFP closes?
15th.
The 15th. So we'll keep you posted as we go through the selection process.
Okay. Yeah, Steve?
When we were looking at the parking of the sheriff's and police officers' cars, the 10 parking places back there were real important. And then we started hearing about the building envelope back there. Is that going to wipe out all those parking places, or are they going to be incorporated in a little parking thing underneath, or how would you envision that?
Well, I think our initial vision was that we'd be able to maintain some parking underneath. Again, that's part of what the facility study will help us see if that's a feasible footprint. We don't know what utilities we might have to relocate. I know there's a utility corridor back there because there are some big green boxes back there, but so that will help us identify whether we've got to find even greater alternative parking solutions or whether we can incorporate those into any future plans. Frankly, I don't see in the immediate future that we'd be developing back there versus maybe doing some real changes to the existing space that we have. I think that's probably our most feasible option.
Anybody else with open discussion?
George?
Michael?
We've hired a landfill manager, is that right?
She is going to be here tomorrow to be introduced to
Okay.
tomorrow morning. Yeah, Kathy Hall.
Good. And what about our IT director?
Well, it's funny you should ask. We just completed interviews this last week, and in fact have extended an offer which has been accepted. I've forgotten John's last name.
Lloyd.
John Lloyd is the individual that was selected. He comes with a lot of experience. He's been the Chief Information Officer for Jefferson County. He's been the Chief Information Officer for another county in New Mexico.
Bernalillo, which
Bernalillo
is
County.
Albuquerque.
Okay, Albuquerque area. He has played a significant technology leadership role for the University of Colorado. We are very, very excited. It happens, his wife really likes fly fishing, and they've been looking at the Roaring Fork Valley for quite a while, and so we quite frankly feel like we got really lucky bringing somebody with his level of experience, the certifications he's bringing to the table, and accomplishments he's had in other organizations. And so right now we're anticipating he's actually going to be starting at first week in April. We're still working through those logistics, so we weren't quite ready to make the announcement, but we believe we'll have a new Chief Technology Officer starting the first week of April, and he's done exactly what we're looking for, which is both managed significant contractual relationships and built IT organizations from the ground up.
Great, thank you, John.
So we're pretty excited about
Good
that.
job. Okay, there's no other open discussion. We're going to take a long break today. We'll be back here at 4 o'clock with a joint meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board.
Great. Thank you.
All right, guys, I thought the Pro Challenge would be a little bit longer discussion.
Okay, we're back, and we're sitting with our Healthy Rivers and Stream Board. This is our joint meeting as part of our agenda. We'll spend about an hour with you folks, and then you'll continue on with your own meeting at 5. So, thank you. This is our semi-annually 3 times a year?
It's been,
It's been a while, it seems like.
yeah, it's been a while. It has not had a regular periodicity. It's the 4th time we've done it, I think, since.
Yeah, yeah, but it's always good to get together and touch base and see how things are going. And I asked John to print out a protocol and guidelines for the monetary grant awards and how you decide to use that. So perhaps we could use that as a first topic. But before we do that, we'll just open this up for general board comments from the BOCC and the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board. Does anybody have any general comments they'd like to make?
You know, George, maybe if we could, just to keep us straight and square, if we could adopt the agenda that I laid out in front of everybody. As an agenda for the board.
Do we need to adopt it, or does your board need to adopt it?
Well, it's, as a joint meeting, it's actually better to do it with both boards. It's going to govern this meeting, the joint meeting, as well as our continued meeting after the BOCC meets.
Okay.
So both boards really have to participate in it. And we don't really need to have a motion and a second and so forth, but if you would call a question simply if all the members are in agreement, we can have simply a voice acclamation of acceptance of the agenda.
Okay, does everybody, Michael?
Well, are we in a work session, or are we in a special session?
This is a regular meeting of the Pickens County Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, and this is a continuation of a work session meeting of the BOCC, and the two boards are together to facilitate dialogue.
So, but the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board is actually joining the BOCC work session at this point.
Okay.
I thought you were joining us.
Just got
potato. I
mean, we could do this. It's just kind of odd. We never do this process when we meet with the open space.
No, but the only reason I'm asking the board to do it now, just to make it not too complicated and just do it by an acclamation of assent, is simply that we reorganize some of the schedule of discussion items and would drop in your item of the grant guidelines as a discussion topic as well.
Okay, so we just have some general agenda items. We may or may not get to all of them at our meeting, and then you have your own agenda that continues on after our meeting concludes, the BOCC. So is everyone in concurrence with what we'd like to discuss or try to discuss? And or does someone else have something else that we want to try to place on the agenda?
Support the agenda in front of us.
Nod heads.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so then we'll just just open up just for general board comments. Anyone have any board comments? Steve.
I would like to thank all the members of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board for being on the board. I know you get thick packets from time to time. You have a lot of studying to do, and you work pretty hard, and you have a very important board. And having served on county advisory boards myself, I appreciate the effort that you're putting into it, and just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we'll move on. Again, I just wanted to, though we probably should have added this as a program update, just to hear from the Healthy Rivers and Stream Boards, because we occasionally have been getting requests from you, and we've also seen minutes where you've actually denied some funding requests. So just to try to get a better understanding in terms of what sort of process you folks go through when a when an applicant comes before you, and how you sort of weigh and judge those grants and the amounts, because you're still, even though you've been seated for quite a few years, I think, I know that the earlier years it was kind of a struggle in terms of trying to decide how to make those decisions. So just kind of curious how that process works, and because that would help us when those grant requests come forward.
And do you want to get into that now before these other earlier items on the agenda?
Yeah, this is just sort of more of a general, because some of that will probably relate to some of these other agenda items coming up. So it'd be good to have a little background, I think.
Well, I'll make a comment that we did go through this procedure that's been outlined here, and we approved it. But then everybody who comes along, nearly everybody, claims that their project is time sensitive. Everybody says they can't wait. We gotta be on your next agenda. And so that makes it very difficult to apply this. And some of them, of course, truly are time agenda sensitive. But that's been our big problem following this routine.
But you would still use the same
Well,
point system in the
Yes,
matrix.
yes, we do that. We rate them, and I mean, probably not quite as formally as this is outlined, but yeah, we consider all those factors.
And does that seem to be working fairly well for you?
I think so. What does the rest of the board feel about that?
In general, I think it has, as far as, like you said, we haven't exactly rated them according to this point scale as formally as is outlined here. That might be something that we could look at with some future ones, I don't know.
Yeah, I think occasionally too that if they can't get past sort of the goals of the river board, that if the project maybe doesn't quite coincide as well as we would like it to with our goals, then that can be problematic. And just recently, I think that kind of was why we decided not to fund a recent project, in my mind. But yes, we also left it open. We were trying to sort of have a goal of, was it a one time during the year that we were going to maybe look at everything or something like that? But then we decided that we would take all projects that were brought to us and we would evaluate them at that one time during the year. But then we decided to leave it open and be more flexible in case we did have, projects that came in that were time sensitive. And so I think we've kind of gotten a little bit more towards getting away from having. In fact, we have never really taken an actual date and taken projects like, in September every year, this is when we're going to look at all projects that have been brought to us. We haven't really done that as of yet because, like Bill just said, most people, in fact, everyone, I think, has said it's a time-sensitive issue. So that's been one of our struggles.
Rachel?
Well, I think that part of that background on that is the various grants that these proponents may be pursuing are often released throughout the year. And so when there's money available through the 1177 process or money available through other processes or other funds, it's just all doesn't line up for a September, October. And even this year, an example would be some of the attempts to find ag water for mitigation in the streams with the drought. It's hard to tell in September, you're going to have a drought in March. So I can understand that, that a hard and fast rule like that may not be beneficial.
Well, and from a budgetary point of view, we haven't established a certain amount of the money that we get that would be allocated for grants as opposed to projects that we undertake ourselves. And we've discussed that budgetary process because what we don't want to do is end up at 9 months into a year, have no money left, and have something like the need for ag water mitigation to come up and not be able to fund it. And we don't have a huge fund, but we've talked about keeping a certain amount in reserve, maybe even having a cap on how much we would spend on grants, and those things are sort of fluid at this point because although we've been around for I think 3 years now, the project or this program is still evolving. We're still trying to get a grip on what the real community needs are and what we're likely to see down the road in terms of long-range planning, the types of monies that we're going to need, types of monies that you guys think we might need. After all, you guys authorize the expenditures. We only recommend them. So we're still in a learning phase as far as that goes, and At some point, we may say 30% of our budget should be for third-party grants or something like that, but we're not there yet. When you look at the Open Space and Trails program, it's a little easier for them because they have legislatively established percentages of their budget that they have to use in certain ways. We don't have those constraints, but at the same time, we haven't, I think, quite grasped what the community needs are. We get a lot of requests for some pretty expensive projects, and we could easily spend this entire fund right up front each year, I think. Just the stream gauging project itself would have been something like $800,000. And when you're looking at a $900,000 budget, we can't do something that good. So, I don't know. I don't know if we want to set a cap or a limit, but it's something that I think over time will evolve.
And a problem of not having segregated money for water quantity is that we've got a reputation now that there are millions sitting there, and we don't have plans for them. And so I've heard this from several applicants that it's as if we're thought of now as some sort of Scrooge body here that's interested primarily in building up money and not honoring their requests. But when we do get involved in quantity matters, that's going to require huge amounts of money, and for us to deplete our reserves as we could have in the February meeting, we could have recommended the expenditure of $600,000 in an hour. That's the way those things were those two requests were presented to us. So I think, as Rick points out, if we can segregate, and if we had a fixed amount available for grants, then that would make our lives easier, really, in terms of dealing with applicants.
Yeah, I mean, you guys get about a tenth of what the Open Space and Trails gets. And I think the original intent when the board decided to put together this ballot issue was looking at the long-range issues. And some of those issues are on program updates, whether it's addressing Trans Mountain diversions or just opportunities to purchase water. So I think the public needs to understand that these dollars are not designated just for specific current projects, but it's a long-range vision because the war chest isn't that large. And as Rick said, if you get into one of these battles in water court, it's going to be a long, expensive affair.
I think the one other thing that's probably useful to us is to get some idea of what the county's goals and objectives for each year might be as far up front as possible. We had engineering come to us last meeting to talk about the drainage project out at the Airport Business Center, which has a huge amount of value to it. It's really an important project, and it's probably very appropriate to come to this board. We don't know from time to time, at least we haven't so far, I don't think, and John will probably correct me if I misstate this, but if the county itself, through its Public Works Department or engineering or its planning department, have goals for the upcoming year that they expect at some point to come to us for and ask for a recommendation on expenditures, it's probably easier for us to know those types of goals sooner rather than later, simply so we can plan for the overall year as best we can, because we know that there's going to be other people walking in the door at virtually any meeting asking for some kind of grant to help them with a project, as with Aspen Village came in recently, or the stream gauge projects. People in the community are pretty creative about coming up with ways to spend money, and obviously the county also has some priorities, and we want to be working with you guys and with the various county departments to make sure we're not missing something up front that we then have to say down the road, we've already committed the expenditures and we can't do it.
Yeah, looking through the kind of the sheet, I think it'd be important, as it evolves, because all paperwork evolves, to really list the bullet points on the ballot language as well somewhere, because this kind of refers to the goals of the river board. It doesn't really mention the goals of the ballot language. And I think it's mutually both of those things. I mean, because I totally think your board is fulfilling the goals of the ballot language, but I think that that's always helpful in doing a criteria and judging things, is how well does it match the ballot language. And then, my second point would just be, as much as we're looking at it, or could look at it, should look at it as a one-year frame, for me it's almost a 5 or 10-year budgeting frame, because, if you get to those larger issues such as trans-basin diversions, Grand County's example is they spent well over $2 million from their general fund for their stream management, documentation, and work to be able to go to battle for the appropriate mitigation from the Front Range. And so there are some potentially very, very large looming numbers out there. And so in that sense, it is appropriate to be developing a fund balance towards some of those things within your fund, and know that this is why we're not spending down each year to a certain level. We'd like to see a growing balance. I mean, and even if you get back to the origins of the Open Space and Trails Board, they were building up a balance at times too, so they could do projects without bonding and save all that kind of additional cost of bonding and interest and things like that. So I think it really needs to be a little bit of that 10-year look too. I don't like litigation costs as much as anyone else, things you can't feel, and touch and see, but those are as real for the long term on this fund and these purposes as anything else.
Yeah, Rachel, I think that's really great feedback for us, because I think it makes us feel better that it's okay to see that we have some growing funds perhaps, and that we can do that. In fact, that's been a kind of a big issue for me. I don't know if you remember during my interview for reapplying for this, I'm concerned about having something at the ready for when some of these potentially bigger issues like Grand County saw come up, for the county and for the watershed. So I think that's good feedback. It makes us feel better about doing that and telling applicants that, this is the reason why maybe we're not just handing out every dollar every year right now. So thanks.
Any other comments on this topic?
Thinking, occasionally it comes up that the county will, I think, can spend money out of HRSB funds without going through the HRSB advisory board. And that makes me a little nervous at times, only because if that were to happen, say a decision is made to spend money that doesn't go through us, yet our name somehow seems to be on it. I'm wondering, has this happened recently? Like I think there's a new hire, for instance, and it sounds like I thought I read HRSB was paying for it, but nobody on HRSB had heard of it yet, so it could have just been something that was misreported, or maybe I don't understand. But I'm concerned that BOCC may get an idea for a project and go off with a plan to put funds into it without going through us. And I don't know if I have a problem with that, but it would just be, I'd like to know what the rules are and if the protocol is well established and we're following that.
Yeah, I don't know of any case where that's happened.
Isn't there a new hire or a plan to hire?
I think what you're talking about is the newspaper story when we were making the decision on hiring a new attorney, and what there was each fund covers the amount of direct costs and overhead that it costs to administer the fund. And so what was in that was a calculation of how much of time is spent from various attorneys' office staff in support of the Healthy Rivers and Streams activities. So it's more of an operational expense. I don't think there's been any new positions or new projects that have been funded out of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board that hasn't been recommended by this body. But from time to time, those calculations are going to change as more time is either spent by attorney's office staff or maybe finance staff in providing services or what have you.
Right. So what I guess I'm wondering is, nobody likes reading about it in the paper before they hear about it, and it's not a big deal. But I was just thinking, we're trying to get an idea of how much money we have, how much we're going to spend, how much we allocate.
I guess we should know what the county's thinking. Usually we do. It seems like it has worked in the past.
You'll see it on the spreadsheet as a cost allocation is what John's talking about. And
Right.
That's where it gets reflected.
In response to your concern, Greg, if any issue came up that I felt was a Healthy Rivers and Streams issue that hadn't been referred to you first, I would want to send it to you for your comments, because your input would be valuable into a discussion on something. And if it hadn't gone through you already, I'd want to solicit your opinion.
I'd just like to take Rachel's comment and Bill's and link them together to the extent that there is awareness at the BOCC level of things coming down the road, 3 years, 5 years, or more. It would be helpful that we were aware of that as soon as you became aware of it, or as soon as staff became aware of it, to the extent that it would have that kind of an impact. That way, assuming that we were able to allocate the resources that we have, we can then reallocate those resources in anticipation of something big, or something onerous, if it's onerous, or something positive if we see that. So I think that would be helpful to do, not just on an annualized basis, but over time, as you're starting to see new issues pop up, or responses to judgments, for example, that have a potential impact where we might have to be prepared for that. So I guess what I'm suggesting is formalizing it to the extent that staff knows it, you know it, to the extent that we know it back to you, but certainly being able to adjust, because if all of a sudden, as Bill said, somebody shows up or you show up saying we need to do this and there's no funding for it or we haven't allocated it, the sooner we know that, the sooner we can make adjustments down the road.
Michael, then Rachel?
Well, in the case of GR, that was an engineering project for the improvement of roads, and then that became a drainage project, and then that. So I don't actually think we would have anticipated the GR come to you, quite frankly. I think, that was sort of the left hand doing something the right hand wasn't aware of. We don't have that kind of supervision over road and bridge at all.
Yeah, Michael, I wasn't being critical about him.
No,
I thought it was great that he came. And
I'm just talking about the dynamics of what the board isn't, Oz all powerful here. We just don't know. So GRs came out of the road and bridge department. John did.
Actually, I think so. I think there's a couple things we could do. One, that the county has recently put together a capital plan, and that's a new kind of budgeting tool for us. And that's something, John, I could spend a little bit of time going over with you guys so you can see what kind of projects and which ones may have some water. Typically for us, I think it'd be water quality types of questions, of which there aren't many. In the case of the ABC, when we were talking about it during budget, the board had raised questions about were there opportunities for us to put water quality enhancements into the scope that we had already proposed, and during the budget it was suggested that staff approach the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board to see if we expanded the scope of that AABC project to include a stronger water quality component. Is that something we could partner on? Because quite frankly, we've been struggling to fund those capital improvements. And so that added almost 12% onto the cost of the project to do enhanced water quality. We thought it was a good idea. And so you're right, Michael, we didn't vet a specific request through the board or such outside of that budget discussion. We took that direction out of budget and came to you guys. And I think as we evolve with our longer term planning on budget and such, I'd be happy to volunteer either myself or finance staff. If it fits in, John, with your agendas to kind of go over some of our capital plans. I don't think you're going to find that there's a whole lot in there, that this was a unique discussion and a unique project, and I don't think there's a whole lot in our 10-year capital plan that we would be approaching you guys on outside of this project. So.
Well, yeah, except that, you know, our roads essentially are all along rivers. And so it seems to
there
me
is that, yeah.
it seems to me that is going to beg the question, what do we do about water quality? Do we just culvert it? Do we, in the case of the business center was, well, let's not just culvert it to the river, let's put it through a settling pond and deal with it that way. But that might be the case from now on with how we deal with our roads and the drainage from those roads. So that's something we're always going to be tied to about. And in terms of what Greg's question was, I don't see, I don't know if there's a prohibition, but I don't see that the Board of County Commissioners would ever dip into the Healthy Rivers budget and simply spend it on their own. What you saw was a possible allocation of what's already allocated, really. So I mean, I would pledge not to do that, to only spend money that you recommend. But I don't know about the rest of it.
I mean, that's very similar to what we do with Open Space and Trails
Yeah.
Board. We just use, you know, they recommend to us. We don't dip into that at all.
Except on that cost allocation, which
Cost
is
allocation,
formula
right.
driven, and that does change annually based on the services are actually, so that's the one, I think, variable that's, it's driven more by formula and direct service, and then every other major expenditure is, you know, recommended by you guys.
Michael, one thing I hear you saying is maybe we ought to be communicating, or the different departments, when they do their annual budgeting, ought to be communicating with us, you know, at the beginning of our budget process, if they think there's areas where they're going to want to have our participation. I mean, I think the Airport Business Center project is a great project, and I think we're enthusiastic to be part of it. And one other thing that came up in our discussions is whether or not we want to establish a percentage of our budget as a reserve fund for the types of things that we can't really predict right now, but that we know at some point will come up. And you know, whether we want to put 10 or 15% away just on an annual basis for that day when we really have a big issue. I don't know, you know, how you guys feel about that. We haven't formalized that, I don't think. We've talked about it.
Rachel, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting because I could really see where your board could add a lot of policy guidance to those other departments as well. So it's not necessarily about the capital. I would, you know, I would struggle with, you know, and not want to see this fund used for, you know, quote, culverts or runoff of a standard road, but there may be recommendations on our design standards that will enhance water quality. And I know that when we were replacing that one culvert that failed up in Coal Creek, you know, I brought up the connectivity of the river and make sure the culverts are doing the job well in terms of the passage of fish or you know, water supply. And so the more, you know, there's thought about how to apply healthy river standards to any of the projects we're doing, that's appropriate. I don't want to see this. I do think the business center is a little bit of a unique animal there to, you know, say this could really, really enhance water quality and really should be done, and it's for a large population base as opposed to, you know, just a thoroughfare. But I don't want to see the fund becoming an adjunct to, you know, our other fund for roads and capital along those lines. And, you know, I guess perhaps we haven't formalized the link for communication, but I've always thought it was through John Ely's office because he's working with you and he's working with us, and you know, we can easily outline some of those potential threats that we don't know exactly what they are or where they are, but you know, PSOP has been one on the front burner from day one when we first started this, and it kind of ebbs and flows as far as whether it's gearing up or gearing back down at any given time. But you know, just looking at your current program list and looking at, you know, the West Divide effort, these sort of things, it's really hard to put a final dollar on what it will cost to fight the West Divide project, you know, and how do you budget X amount for, you know, legal? That's the challenge for me.
Could we put a cap on legal, just so?
Well, at the point at which we decide to say, okay, we'll let that trans-basin diversion go because we capped how much funds we have for legal fees this year, I'm not so sure I'll live with that so well.
This may be a good segue to look at some of these program updates, and West Divide is certainly one of them when you talk about legal and needing to keep a reserve. I mean, this is a good example, and as well as a good example in terms of how the county does the cost allocation, because as this heats up, it's going to require more staff time. I mean, there's a reality there, but you know, it comes down to priorities. You know, what are the priorities? So, do you want to give us an update on that, on the West Divide?
Briefly, the River Board is going to have a longer discussion at the end of our meeting, but right now the status of that particular effort is essentially unchanged. The county remains committed to oppose the application for diligence on the project as filed by the two involved districts that hold the water rights, the conditional water rights that are associated with the project. The matter is set for trial before the water judge in August of this year. Discovery is ongoing. There is only one pretrial motion pending right now, a motion for termination of law, which, based upon the judge's comments 2 weeks ago, or I'm sorry, actually, well, it started 2 weeks ago. There was a pretrial conference on Monday this week, and an anticipated resolution of that particular motion no later than May. The case is continuing and progressing to that trial date. The county has 3 experts that are preparing their expert reports in compliance with the standard water court rules and the case management order entered by the court. And they'll also be done next month, and we are proceeding. I have not heard any indication from either board of wanting to relax the effort. And to the contrary, the only thing I've heard is that this is, as you said, George, a high priority item for us, particularly considering the effort and expenditure of funds that the county has made in other aspects of the Crystal River drainage, and that this effort is wholly worth the fight. I think that's about it as far as that update goes, unless there are any kind of particular questions.
Questions or comments?
Is there a settlement conference scheduled?
There have been several, and they have been in response to settlement overtures that have been made by the 2 districts to the county and to the other opposers. And at this point, they have not produced any fruit, and personally, I'm not that optimistic.
And John, at the last settlement conference last week, somebody from one of the boards, one of the River District boards said, well, they were considering an order from the judge compelling mediation. So there's still some possibility.
I can't imagine that happening simply because the court cannot compel parties to resolve their issues if they cannot be resolved. And, you know, the court can require a settlement discussion, which is what has happened already, pursuant to a court request. They did not bear fruit, and the function of the court is to resolve the dispute by hearing the controversy, not requiring the parties to dispose of it before it gets to court.
Well, that's their hope.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go their way if that's what they're banking on.
Any other questions for John on this topic?
How long is the trial set for, Judge?
It's set for 10 days. It's an erratic schedule, though. It breaks and comes back, so it's not 10 consecutive days.
I thought it was 21 days.
Well, it's spread out over the 3 weeks. There are gaps in there.
Do we have co-counsel in that?
Yes, we have 2 law firms that are assisting us and 3 engineering firms, well, and 1 accounting firm.
So we're going to spend a bunch of money going to court.
Well, it's a question of priorities, like you said, but it should be the type of expenditure that, that you're willing to spend. If you don't want to do it, then we need to discuss it, but it is what it is, I guess. It's, more than likely, at the end of it, there will be an appeal too.
So we'll make new law.
Potentially.
Okay, other questions on that topic? Crystal River Wild and Scenic designation.
I kind of joke that this is the year of the crystal, but it really sort of is. Ever since American Rivers designated it as one of its top 10 threatened rivers in the country, we really have been drawn into a heightened awareness, I think, of the situation on the crystal. Wild and scenic discussions started in the 80s initially with concerning the Crystal River, and actually they were first discussed by the Colorado River District. The best that I can determine is the River District backed off of that pursuit or endeavor because of the implication it would have upon their own additional water rights represented in the West Divide project. It was discussed on and off by many of the residents there over the years, but has now been discussed in more in detail, I guess, if you will. Pickens County, along with American Rivers, the Roaring Fork Conservancy, Wilderness Workshop, the town of Carbondale, Roaring Fork Audubon, Western Resources, and several other groups put together 2 public forums, one in Redstone and one in Carbondale, at the end of last year, to discuss the meaning of wild and scenic designation and what that would imply, what it means, what it doesn't mean, how it would affect property owners, water right holders, etc. What particular benefits would be gleaned not only by people who are on the river, but also as the community itself, from just a general enhancement to overall tourist economy. The assessment I would give those 2 meetings was very positive. I think that slightly over 120 people showed up for the 2 meetings. However, it was clear that I think at that point that what was really needed was more of a grassroots effort and determination then by the local citizens and property owners within the Crystal that this is something that they thought should be pursued. And if it is, then I think the county certainly should be willing to facilitate and assist in that effort. If it's not, then it's something that just won't go forward. And I think that the programmatic approach, so to speak, would be to try to facilitate as much of a dissemination of information so that people really have a better understanding how it would affect them and how it would not affect them. Oddly enough, wild and scenic comes with a lot of misinformation for one reason or another. People have assumed that it would affect them in one way or would not produce benefits in another, and a lot of times those assumptions are not well grounded. And so what we would try to do is try to put forth as much information in an objective way, and then as I said, let the citizens and the property owners in the Crystal River Valley weigh in on the subject. And if people think it's a worthwhile endeavor, then be prepared to go forward with it. If not, then look for Plan B, or look at some other alternatives that would go as far to protect the riparian qualities and the values that are inherent in the Crystal River.
So our role as a county would perhaps be to help facilitate those discussions and to participate in any group that's maybe formed.
Right.
along
And to
those
assist any
lines.
group that might be formed, any citizen group in the Crystal.
I should just back up real quickly, just to let you guys know, the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board, that the BOCC is 100% committed in terms of protecting the Crystal against any diversions or dams. So that has been a top priority for us, just to let you know that.
I think the analysis of the wild and scenic designation is timely for another reason, and that, of course, is all of the activity and discussion that's related to Thompson Divide and potential oil or gas exploration and extraction that might occur in the region, and the ability of wild and scenic to assist in efforts to preserve and protect that area is not something that I think should be overlooked.
Questions or comments on that topic, Rachel?
Well, just a quick comment, and it relates a little bit to the kayak park as well in Rissids. But, you know, within the statewide water plan that they're trying to form between the interbasin combat committees, you know, the concept of no regrets or low regrets policies have been bubbling up, that we should not do anything now that we would regret later or make it harder to fulfill our, quote, water future. And so one of the bullet points has been, well, we want to avoid any endangered or threatened species listings. We want to avoid future, you know, we, meaning that group, would like to avoid any wild and scenic designations because they feel they foreclose water opportunities for water development in the future. So, you know, we've really brought it very strongly up at the 1177 roundtable to particularly say that, you know, recreation and channel diversions are one of the few tools on the West Slope to maintain our resort economy and ecology, and to, you know, try to eliminate that as any, you know, that would create a lot of regrets perhaps on our side, and we'll have to see where those conversations are going. But, you know, wild and scenic is something they also have their eyes on, and they, you know, Upper Colorado had some stretches that were suitable for designation, and there's just been a working group started and has been at it for years now to say how can we manage the river to maintain these qualities without such a designation. So there's resistance out there to those sorts of concepts, whether they're good or bad.
Have you guys discussed this topic at all?
Amongst ourselves, definitely.
But not as a board? I'm just curious.
Just the idea of the regrets is, you know, you have to define regret, because they're regretting not having the ability to take the water elsewhere, we'd be regretting the... So when I heard them saying regrets, so yeah, they're going to regret wasting this water or destroying an aquifer, an ecosystem. But really what they're regretting is not being able to drunk it in Denver.
I understand.
Yeah, in terms of discussion with the residents of the Crystal Valley, it's quite popular. I mean, and I've been to two of the talks, and also been up and talked with the Marbletown Board, and just don't hear objections, other than one guy who keeps worrying about being told what color he'd have to paint his barn. But basically, it's very well received in the Crystal Valley, the idea of wild and scenic.
And you know, the forum, sorry, the two meetings that John was talking about that were given to the public, I went to one of those, and it seems like maybe some of those folks need to come and talk to your folks and tell them that actually it's not necessarily a water grab, you know, wild and scenic designation, and they had some very good explanations for how that could be avoided. And
yeah, sure, certainly.
Yeah, I think as John said, I think that one of the key challenges would be the education of what that really means.
yeah, it really helped jumpstart everyone being for it in the Crystal River Valley. Those meetings did, because those fears were quickly, you know, allied, so.
kayak park. The kayak park was presented to us probably several years ago, and I remember John bet me a beer that this would be done by X amount of time. I said, I don't think so. And he still owes me that beer.
Yeah, it was a number of years ago, George. And the discussion actually was prompted by the drought cycle in 2002, when the county was looking for ways to try to enter into the area of protection of the water resource, not only for recreation but for all the other aesthetic reasons as well. The discussion preceded the formation of the River Board and the adoption of the tax by the electors of the county, and was initially funded by Open Space and Trails. Open Space and Trails dedicated money to it, which helped the project go forward to completion of a design and the realization of federal permits for the work. It also took it through preliminary discussions with the Department of Wildlife as to the sequencing and the appropriate timing of any work should it ultimately get permitted and the work be conducted in a way that would be, minimize impacts in the river itself and so forth. The project has gone forward, but at a very slow pace because the county has never authorized going forward with it completely, but only sequentially. At this point, the county filed a application for a water right concerning the recreational and channel diversion, the construction of what would be essentially a kayak course. And that water right was met with quite a bit of opposition, or that water application was met with quite a bit of opposition. We've dealt with roughly half of the opposers, but the parties that remain in it, most notably the CWCB, present a very difficult prospect for settlement. The case may yet be set for trial within the next couple of months, and we'll just have to see how that goes. The discussion I've had in the past, however, has always been clear that the water right basically preserves our ability to call water to that particular reach of the river. But the construction of the facility itself is an independent activity. You can have the facility without the water right, and the best example of that is Glen Springs. You can have the water right absence of the facility, but in that case, the water right would be conditional because there's no facility built yet, which then would require us to go back in court and run through the same gauntlet once the project has been constructed and the right needs to be perfected. That definitely is, I'm not sure, a path that we want to go down. Up to this point, the county has not authorized going forward with construction. We actively looked at the costs of construction during the height of the recession and saw the anticipated cost of construction drop by over 50%, but of course as the economy now is rebounding, those costs of construction are climbing right back up. And I'm not sure if we're still in a position of realizing savings since the very first budget estimates that occurred back in 2007. So the project is moving forward, at least in water court, but nothing else on the ground. The town of Basalt, of course, has, ever since the first discussions, have been involved and has been very supportive and active in that support and encouraging and so forth. And now with the town's acquisition of the former Pan and Fork mobile home park and the town looking at what it can do with that particular riverfront, would love to incorporate the two plans into a larger river improvement, which, based on what I've heard, sounds, like it would be very nice if realized. But right now, nothing is moving forward, of course, on the ground or in the water.
John, can you remind us
what the CWCB's issue is with the project?
The CWCB's issue with the project. The CWCB's issue is that we are trying to call, or have the ability to call, too much water to the project. They would like to see our ability reduced in last discussions by about a half.
It's like 100 CFS or something, isn't it?
No, it's a variable flow. It's the only thing that you can analogize it to would perhaps be the flow
Percentage of
regime
the-
at Snowmass Creek. It goes through, it essentially mirrors a hydrograph, so that you can call quite a bit more water in June and early July than you can.
But even at the peak, it wasn't that much, I don't remember.
No, well, it was, basically the way it was structured is such that we could work with other water rights holders in the river. Other water rights holders in the river, particularly Town of Basalt and Basalt Water Conservancy District, realizing that they have to make their call to realize their either their service demands or their contractual obligations, would essentially ensure a certain floor to the flow, and that our right would kick in above that to try to augment it to a higher level. The flow builds and then recedes, but at the high water level, it's very much more than 1,000 CFS.
Any other questions or comments on kayak park?
I guess the only real thing to think about in regards to the kayak park is if the boards want to discuss changing the profile or trying to take advantage of what might still be out there as far as lower construction costs and moving the project forward quicker, or if the boards are content with the pace at which this is progressing.
Rachel?
I believe that topic would really require a larger work session time than we have today.
Oh, for sure, for resolution, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, I believe very strongly in the project, and I'd like to see it go forward. And I think we have like a December 2011 filing date for those water rights for the RISD. And
December, actually, it was filed in 2010.
2010, December 2010. But, the whole collaborative Colorado River settlement from Grand Valley down through Eagle, one of the big premises was a RISD in the Gore Canyon. And that had to go through several iterations with CWCB before they granted it. And they did just grant that this last meeting that they had in January, but they did get scaled back considerably from what they would have liked to have seen. But I'm just not so sure you're really going to see a viable RISD program in this state, going too much further out. And we have our foot in the door, and I wouldn't want to have to send you through water court twice on that, doing the conditional rights and things like that. So I think we should have a longer work session on that and see what the merits are, and maybe really get it moving forward more quickly rather than sequentially in a way that we'll have to go to water court twice for the same thing.
Well, and without getting into the larger topic, that's a pretty degraded section of river right now, so almost anything we do there has the potential to improve it,
Yes.
regardless of what happens with the water right.
What should I take from that? Should we
Well, we
schedule
should,
that for further discussion sometime?
we should probably have a work session on that. It's been a while since we have discussed that, and it'd be interesting if you guys have an opportunity in one of your meetings to spend a little time on that, and perhaps then pass on some recommendations to us as well. It could be helpful.
Got it.
So this next one is the land value hedonistic appraisal, and we had a presentation from John quite a while ago, and we had a fellow who came up from CSU to do that, and we never really made any decision, yay or nay, on that, and I don't know whether you guys had had a chance to discuss that and make any recommendations or not, but I'm surprised to see this sort of resurface, actually, to tell you the truth, so.
Well, sometimes you just got to keep asking the question.
Well, there was
Yeah, the river board did discuss it, and they did unanimously recommend funding of it. The BOCC did not, however, agree to that recommendation, and so the project stopped. It was set to go, would have gone last summer. As a consequence, the topic generally, or what it might accomplish, is still there. And as you said, George, the board didn't say yes, didn't say no, but in saying no, it stopped it from going forward. And so the purpose here is to find out, I guess, or to touch base to see what the pleasure of the boards, or what the attitude of the boards would be on this project at this point.
And again, that may be a longer discussion than we have time for right now.
Well, at least we know that it's still out there to
at least
deal with.
I always credit John for at least thinking outside the box. So again, you guys have a chance to revisit that topic and wanted to then forward on a recommendation. We can bring that back to a work session and have a discussion on that and have perhaps a resolution.
And just one quick comment. I think, yeah, it sounded like for some reason at that time there was a disconnect between what our board was thinking and what you heard our board was thinking. And so, yeah, I think it'll be good to be able to sort of revisit that and maybe get a little bit more connected on, give us some time to let you know what we're feeling.
Yeah,
about
because
that
as I
topic.
recall, there was quite a spread in terms of costs involved in that. A fairly substantial spread in terms of the cost. So depending on what sort of approach one took and phasing. So
Yeah, the appropriation request was for $80,000.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we also hung up a little bit on what the value, how valuable would it be in some of our future water battles or not? And we just didn't reach a conclusion on that.
I think that the newspaper reported that we had turned it down. I think there was a misreporting on that, and then maybe, I don't know if that influenced your take on it or not, but unfortunately I don't know if it was correct. Must have been corrected at some point, but at the time it sounded like they got it wrong, they got it backwards. And so we had approved it. Since then, I've talked to a few realtors in town who would love to participate and help out however they can because they think there's a direct connection between the quality of our rivers and streams and the property values along them. And I think we'd get a lot of public support for that among the people who are paying attention to it. It's one of those things that at first glance may seem like a strange use of public funds. I know there was a letter to the paper that was, one regular letter writer thought it was a big waste of money, but I'm not sure they actually knew what we were talking about. So it would be worth revisiting. Does it need a work session? Or let's just go for it. That'd be
Well,
nice.
we need a work session on our side, maybe not on yours. So if the board is interested in doing something, having a work session on that, we can certainly put that on a future agenda.
Well, we should reach closure one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay, we're just about out of time. North Star potential work?
The county paid for a consultant to take a look at the reach of the upper Roaring Fork that was more or less at the confluence of Hunter Creek up to the diversion of Salvation Ditch. And the consultant was MEC, which is a consultant firm that is owned and managed by Bill Miller. Bill Miller is the same aquatic hydrologist who was employed by the city of Aspen to look at the effects of their various projects. One of the things that we asked Bill to do as he was concluding an analysis of that particular reach is to go up a little bit higher and take a look at North Star and ask us or tell us if we're managing the property appropriately. Take a look at the way the channel is being down cut by the river. Take a look at whether there is impediment to a natural flooding process that would occur over the wetland. Take a look at essentially the effects of human use of the property and whether or not we are being good stewards. And at any rate, the conclusion that Bill came up with
is that there were three particular items that he would recommend for the county. And one of them was a relatively easy one to employ, especially in a year where there is a below average river flow anticipated, like last year or this year. And that particular fix was to take a look at three particular points on the river that had been previously developed by river processes as channels and that were now being down cut. They were developed at one point as a ditch system that was being used to flood property below North Star over to the base of the hill, but were no longer being used. As a consequence, the property was not flooding in a sort of a natural seasonal event, and that the water being maintained in the channel was then down cutting the channel even further. The wetland could be improved, both functionality improvement and from an ecological standpoint, of a biodiversity type of an analysis, if we were to do some simple excavation. And we're not talking about backhoes here at North Star, but simply by hand almost, being able to go in there and open these sluiceways, for the lack of a better term, to allow water to naturally flow back into the wetland during the spring runoff. The water then would be held by the wetland as a consequence of what it is, and slowly released throughout the year until the groundwater discharges into the river. It would help river flows below North Star, and would also improve the quality of the natural environment on North Star. So it's a project that was recommended, but and he also recommended a couple of other steps that were a little bit more involved, but that certainly was one that he highlighted for us as something that was easily, or more easily obtained, that would have a lot of benefit for the effort that was expended. However, it hasn't been kick-started, and I would like to be able to explore that. I know that Open Space and Trails, with their trail work, doesn't have the ability to go forward and do it, certainly this year anyways, but I think that we do. And should take a look at how we're managing, this piece of public property, and do it better if we can.
So would that be something that your board would discuss?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Have you discussed it at this point, up to this point? Or?
Not recently.
Yeah.
We have in the past. We did after
discussed
Bill's
it.
report came out.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're about out of time here. You have just a few other little. We haven't really received any recent recommendations for any projects. I know one or two are probably will be coming before us perhaps shortly. So.
And the two that are down there were just to discuss the rationale and the thinking behind the recommendation against funding those projects. And then the last topic in the box, so to speak, is definitely a broader discussion, but I think that it'll be around for a while. We can take it up again, and if the two boards are together again, then what I'll do is pursue it with the River Board and then go back to the BOCC, and hopefully we can schedule a joint meeting again in another 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, I think we should do that, at least strive for a semi-annual meeting. I think it was productive, just even a preliminary conversation to try to keep the communications going and understanding in terms of what's going on both sides of the table. So last comments, Rachel?
Well, so there was a recommendation against the Airport Business Center stormwater project?
Yes.
Well, was that a recommendation for?
Yeah, we did not recommend, we did not.
I think we were looking more for some additional information on OSTB's participation and possibly private property owners' participation out there. I think everybody expressed a fair amount of support for the concept of the project. We just wanted to see what other funding sources were out there.
Oh, I didn't think we did provide support, but I thought we said we needed to discuss it more, and obviously we do.
I took away a
because-
different message
Yeah,
from that.
because Rick's correct. I mean, we obviously have some different thoughts on the board right now, and so, yeah, we'll need to discuss that further.
Okay, we'll wait to hear how that goes.
And more information would be great.
Yeah. Bill?
Well, and then, are we finished with that? Do you want to talk about Aspen Village or not?
I don't think so. I mean, we haven't got a recommendation in front of us unless you want to give us a 1-minute reason.
Well, in 1 minute, it was our feeling that sewage treatment has always been the responsibility of the property owner, either septic or a payment of taxes to a district or through a municipality, and we didn't think that this case was where we should vary from that, and the thought was that the voters probably didn't intend to change the responsibility for sewage treatment to people paying sales tax. So I think that was our unanimous and pretty strong feeling there against funding that. Also considering how many sewage treatment plants there are in the drainage and how many of them can make arguments that they need help, and we just, it looked like a bad precedent.
Okay, well, with that, we'll adjourn our regular meeting. Grassroots, thank you very much. I don't know if your board wants to take a 2-minute break before Grassroots.
Yeah, let everybody get set.
Thanks again.
Thank you.